time to hammer.
Oh, I gotta really try hard.
Shut it down!
Somehow it's the best.
After the credits.
A YumChunks podcast.
YumChunks!
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of After the Credits. My name is Vince, I'll be your host today. And with me as always, I have Sean.
Hey, I'm Sean. How's it going, Vince?
You know.
Oh, no, that's why I asked.
No, oh, wait, I thought you knew. Okay, well, I'll get you up to speed. I'm dead. And I also have Ryan Davis.
I'm here.
Oh, thank
It's
goodness.
been a while. I gotta say, it's great to be back.
Well, guys, we made it. We made it to the end of Game of Thrones. We never did do a podcast about it, even though we probably promised somebody or many people along the way that we were going to do a weekly podcast. Yeah, that didn't happen. So let's just do a season wrap-up. What do you say?
Yeah, well, we have to reboot our much-loved internet show, Talk of Ice and Fire. The fans
Man,
demanded
what a
it.
show it was.
The audience demanded it, and here we are, fans. We're back.
After a 2-season hiatus? What season did we actually do?
I
Season
think
5,
that
right?
was yeah, it's been 3 seasons. Let's not kid ourselves. All right, well, Ryan,
yeah.
give us a quick rundown, Ryan. What
Wait,
happened this
no,
season?
we're
No, never
jumping
mind.
far ahead, Vince. Your responsibilities. You've gotten a little big for your britches.
How
You have to
dare you
ask
say
us
that?
what
My
we've-
britches fit just fine.
I wanna talk around the chunk
city
fires.
now? Yeah, I was gonna say, Ryan. Actually, it's been like 3 or 4 episodes since you've been on,
Yeah, it has been.
What?
so you must have much tales of adventure. To
Gather around, ye chunkers, around the chunk fire, and I'll tell you a tale of my doings. Well, anyway, since the last time I was on the episodes of the show, let me tell you about a few things. I've done many things, but I'll whittle it down. Sean, I already told you about the Let's Mosey thing, and you said you finished it.
Yes.
I would recommend that highly to Aaron, to Chris, that is on this podcast,
Mhm.
and anyone else that's a fan of Final Fantasy VII. This guy breaks down. He learns Japanese. I'm just summarizing here, and then he plays through both the English and Japanese versions of Final Fantasy VII, and kind of points out different translation things about the game. And it's more than just about the translation of the game. It's more about life itself. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. I highly recommend it to a select audience.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's anyone who has any interest in any sort of translation stuff. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII is the context, but you could probably get a lot from it, even if you're just interested in just like minor cultural differences and how that's conveyed through how things get translated and stuff.
Or even just a general interest in language, I
Yeah.
think. He does a great job of just talking about language in general. I think there's a lot to get out of that podcast or YouTube series.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. On Netflix, I Think You Should Leave is a great show. I think pretty much everyone I know has already seen this, but
Yeah.
if you haven't seen it, watch it immediately.
Mhm.
I mentioned it last episode of our
Oh, you did? Oh,
Pokemon
sorry.
Detective Pikachu. That's right.
Well, I haven't listened to our own podcast yet, so I did watch the end game, but
this isn't
or
any,
listen to
oh well. After we get around the Chunkfire stories, I want to go back to that. But continue.
all right. I watched John Wick 3. Loved it. And this other Netflix movie called The Wandering Earth Project. It's pretty wacky, but you should watch it. I'm not going to give anyone any hints about what this movie is, but you should watch it.
I hope that goes on the Blu-ray box. Just
It's weird. Somehow
pretty
it's
wacky.
not getting like any. I don't know. Netflix has this weird thing where they don't advertise movies very well. I don't know. Anyway, check it out. And also, I don't know if you guys remember, but a while back, or maybe you watched it, but they did a show, Ash vs. Evil Dead show,
Mhm.
and I remember at the time when it was announced, I was like, do I really need more Evil Dead stuff? And so I kind of dismissed it, but it's on Netflix. I think like 3 seasons or something. And I watched it, and I realized I was wrong. I do need more. It's great.
Wow.
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah. So there you go. That's what I've been up to.
Okay. Sean, how about you?
Well, I mean, it hasn't been so long since we're cramming in some episodes this week
We
because
are.
our Detective Pikachu was just out, so I haven't had a ton of free time to do things. But I recently have been watching Star Trek Discovery, which is the new Star Trek show. I'm finally trying to catch up. I'm still only on season 1, but I don't know, Ryan. Did you ever watch that yet?
I've only seen a few episodes from the first season.
Okay.
But I'm meaning
Yeah.
to watch it all, yeah.
I'm about halfway through season 1, and I mean, I'd be interested to hear what you think. I know the general. Well, I don't actually know if it's the general discourse, but the population of people that I guess associate with and I guess are prone to on social media and such do not like that show at all. It's supposed to be pretty bad. But I'm not disliking it. Like, I'm not hating it. I'm not hating it as much as I thought I would. So maybe that's good. Maybe their expectations were, set so low for me that it's making me, enjoy it more than I normally would have. But I'm liking it so far. Like, it's definitely, there's issues I have with it for sure. But
so, Sean, the people who you talk to that don't like it, are they your other podcasting group?
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned a couple times on the cast. I mean, the thing is that the people, and they don't actually hate it. I mean, there's a group of people who hate it because they're the same, they're troglodytes and just like, oh, it's not my Star Trek and this wasn't my, they're not like those type of people, God forbid. Like, they're just like story-wise and character-wise, they're just not super into it. And they just think it does a lot of things that like the new Star Trek movies have done, which I enjoy, but I also, on second viewing, I also recognize how much there's stuff I don't like about those movies. And I think the show kind of takes a lot of just its direction from those films. So I understand why, there's so much, conflict there and why you might not like it.
When you say films, do you mean the
JJ,
new...
the Abrams, the 09 Star Trek.
Okay.
And onward. Like I said, I'm only halfway through the first season, so I know that's hardly, the full spectrum of what the show is. But as of yet, I'm not like hating it. And maybe it will take a turn, or maybe it's a slow dive, but so far it's so good. So, but yeah, it's definitely not Star Trek: The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine or Voyager. Like, so,
Okay.
But I guess I knew that going in, so maybe that's partially why I'm not so, perturbed by it. Anyways, sure. Star Trek Discovery. There you go. Although the CBS All Access app is the worst thing ever.
Well, I think that's the biggest complaint I've heard is that trying to watch this show is the hardest part.
I mean, I finally just got it and have been watching it, but I'm just saying the functionality of the app, regardless of the ridiculousness of having a Star Trek show regulated to an app that's not on broadcast television, is the app itself is constantly crashing on me or making me rewatch stuff. And I can't and there's commercials, like you're paying for this extra thing. And then there's still commercials when you're streaming.
What?
Yeah, it's the worst thing. I'm saying the app itself is awful.
It's so bad.
It's so stupid. It's really frustrating. There's been literally times where I couldn't watch the show because it just couldn't play. Like, sorry, it's down right now. We're having problems. Meh, meh, meh. Anyways, there's my rant against CBS All Access.
Take that, CBS.
All right.
Anyway, sorry, that went off longer. What else? And I just finished this book called Supermarket. Probably no one's heard of. It's relatively new. It just came out this year, but it also wasn't very good. I don't recommend it. It's like a Fight Club and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Kind of take the most not the worst parts, but the most obvious parts of those books/films, and then mixed a little bit with Ready Player One, the worst parts of Ready Player One. And you got yourself a bad book. So don't read that one.
Okay. Thanks for the warning. This is a good place to vet out not watches and not reads as much as
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways, but that's about it, I suppose. Like I said, haven't had to do much time recently, but yeah. Vince, what stories do you have?
Well. Yeah, we've also updated me pretty recently, so I'll be brief about this. I did watch the first episode of that show on HBO called Chernobyl.
Chernobyl.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard
probably
lots
have.
of good things about it. But
Yeah, the first episode I feel like is great. I've actually watched it twice now. And yeah, I really dig like the atmosphere of that show. Like, and there's not a lot plot wise that maybe necessarily happens, but like it really, really like that first episode does a great job of establishing like the universe and just like the tragedy of the event and just like grounding you into like just the horrificness of it, I guess. And just like it's dark and eerie and scary, and it's really good. I don't know. I really like it.
Is it based on the movie?
I don't know.
I don't know.
But
it was a movie.
I think it's just based on the natural or the disaster itself, the accident, the like nuclear, radiation, or like
the
whatever
nuclear meltdown and
the meltdown that happened, and it made me actually want to research the like other meltdowns that have happened, and man, Chernobyl's really bad. Just compared to everything else, like it's much worse than the one that happened in like Japan and like.
Well, because there's the other famous one is 3 Mile Island that happened in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like there were very few casualties in terms of fatalities in that one.
Yeah, but in Chernobyl, it's like a lot of people die, like a whole lot, and then a lot of people suffer like really bad side effects of it. Like just watching that first episode made me just want to research like it. So I'm sure there's like it's like a mini series. I think there's gonna definitely be more episodes, but
yeah,
man, if this is just the first episode, I'm looking forward to the rest. You guys should check it out. And that's about it though. That's all I really have done. I just continue watching the first episode of Chernobyl. That's it.
over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's all I do.
That's a good life. Cool. Well, before we get into, I did want to. So, like I said, Ryan, you haven't been on a couple episodes. And I wanted to at least get your take real briefly on Endgame because just because it was such a big movie and we all, had got to spend forever talking about it. I just wanted to kind of hear, we've talked about it off cast, obviously, but just kind of if you've listened to the episode that we recorded, and then if you had any thoughts or little adjoinders or things you could add to the discussion. What were your takes on that film?
Oh yeah, I thought you guys covered it pretty well. I think I was kind of looking at it, I was like, man, I wish I could be on the podcast because at the time I had seen it 4 times already.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm overqualified to be on the podcast. So it was for the best. But you guys did a great job of covering it. I did love the movie. I thought there was like just everything you guys said about just leading to a good conclusion. I am glad that you guys spent a good amount of time picking out some of the details or like little nods to those who are paying attention for like the callbacks and things like that. So I thought that was really great. Just in general that would be my take on it and the podcast.
All right, cool. Yeah, and so I didn't figure you had any controversial or crazy, things that we left out, but I just wanted to, since it's such a huge movie and something that we've been talking about in some form or another for the last year, whether through trailers or through other MCU films, I just wanted to at least, have you chime in.
I was kind of curious to see if you guys were going to get bogged down in the time travel nuttiness of things making sense or not making sense.
Yeah.
And I think you guys got bogged down in it just enough as you should have. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, you could have spent an entire 10 hours trying to explain it and not explain it and blah, blah, blah. But so you guys did a good job on that.
Yay!
You did it. You get my
Ryan seal
thumbs of approval.
Now it's time for the end Game of Thrones.
All right. This is going to take 10 hours.
Okay. All right. So, general spoiler warning. We are going to talk primarily about season 8. So if you've seen, parts of the show, or you have seen, less than up to season 7. Well, actually, just spoilers for everything. What am I trying to... Just spoilers. Then we're going to say about the whole show, about the whole books, the show, everything. If there's any ever chance that you'll watch and or read it and you don't want to be spoiled, then probably should stop listening. But that being said, hey, Vince, tell us the Song of Ice and Fire.
Oh boy. All right. Well, like the whole thing or just this
No, just
season?
season 8.
Oh, thank God. Okay. All right. Well, season 8.
Or wait, no, who is saying? Ryan, were you saying it or Vince? I forgot.
Oh yeah. Wait. I don't want to say it. Thank God. Okay, Ryan, you say
we'll
it.
tag team it.
Vince,
I'll start off.
Ryan,
Vince,
you go for it,
fill in
sorry.
the gaps, Vince. With things I missed.
Sorry, I forgot
Alright.
that was Ryan.
Okay, whatever. Well, anyway, so season the 8th, it starts out a little slow with people talking in Winterfell for 2 full episodes. It's
Yep.
riveting.
It's actually the only good part of the season, in my opinion. But continue.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too. And then the season, it all builds up to a battle in episode 3, where a lot of people die, and we finally get rid of the Night King thanks to Arya. And then we march south to King's Landing to dethrone Cersei, and we lose a dragon along the way. But we eventually, and we lose some other people too. A bunch of people keep dying because it's this finale, and we assault the King's Landing, and we win. That's to say, Dany's army wins and burns everything. And when I say everything, I mean literally everything. She burns down all of King's Landing, including all the women and children, and the men also. And
not the men.
Not just
somehow
the
they're
men,
the only ones.
but the women and the children. I hate them.
Yep. And let's see, we get the the Clegane's battle, and that's satisfying. Anyway, everyone dies, and I guess ultimate spoiler, Dany is seen as a villainous character in the end. Jon has to kill her, and he is cast away back to the Wall. Arya heads west beyond Westeros. Sansa rules in Winterfell in her own little kingdom, and Bran the Broken becomes the new ruling member of the Six Kingdoms. And Tyrion takes over his hand, and all our fun characters join as part of the High Council, and we're all happy at the end. Ta-da!
The end.
Man, what a perfect summary. I literally have nothing to add except everything.
But those are opinions, not summary, Vince. That's what we're going to talk about now. So, season 8. It's been... I feel like controversial is not the right word, but I guess it's been conflicted in terms of people's reaction to it. So I think this is going to be an interesting discussion and possibly a fun one because, Vince, I know your opinion, and you are very much, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but very much of the opinion that you, I don't want to say hate, but you strongly dislike this season. I actually like this season quite a bit. And we'll get into that. Ryan, what about you?
I think I'm somewhere in the middle. So I'm interested to see what things we agree on and disagree on. Because I guess you're going to disagree with everything from Vince, but I'll agree with 50% of each of you.
And that's the lesson of the Game of Thrones.
Yep. We all learned something.
Yeah, okay, so let me at least kind of state kind of my, I guess, one or two things that I kind of feel approaching this. I think one thing is that I think the word, bad or awful is kind of thrown around too loosely, because I agree that the season is not my favorite season or even the best season of Game of Thrones. I'll be under no illusions of that. And that there are things I was disappointed with for sure. But to call the season bad, I think is kind of disingenuous. Like, you know what's bad is Big Bang Theory or The Room. Like, that is, like...
Yeah.
I know people, like, oh, well, that's not what I mean. You know what I mean? Like, no, I don't know what you mean. You said bad. Well, it's not bad. It's just not as good. Well, then say it's not as good. Don't say it's bad.
Right, because everyone speaks in, like, polarity.
Absolutes. That's my point.
Absolutes,
yeah, like,
exactly.
So I guess that's my thing is that...
I guess I understand what you're saying, but when I say it was bad... I can fully rationalize my point and separate it from the amazing visuals, the amazing score, the great acting.
But that's my point.
I can separate it from all
so
those
there
things.
might be aspects of it, but that's when you say the show or the season is bad, you're including all of that. You're including everything that was part of that season. So if you think
because
this emotional beat for this character was bad, sure, then say that and specify that. I guess my issue is that this generalization and this idea that this entire season was awful. It was awful television. Like, you might not have liked certain things, but it's by no means awful. Like I think that just needs to be clarified, at least in my point of view.
So
Okay.
I agree with those statements because I don't like the absolute, modality. But I'm curious then, how do you feel about the previous season? Because I like this season quite a deal more than the previous one. Would you say that the previous season is bad, or would you say that you have to kind of pick and choose or take?
I mean, to me, there's no season that's bad. If you're going with the universal understanding of like good and bad and stuff, then no,
Okay.
I would say season 7 is not bad. But I do think this season is better than season 7, or I like this season more than season 7.
Okay.
I agree. I was more disappointed with season 7. I think ultimately this season even made season 7 feel a little worse in my eyes. I haven't gone back and watched it since. And you can maybe even say that's a fault for season 8 as well. But I think to me, it again is not a case of it being bad television.
I getcha. That was more of like a calibration question.
Yeah,
So yeah, it makes sense.
Anyways, so I wanted to kind of at least state that. I mean, I don't know, Vince. Do you honestly think that like this season was bad? Like, do you consider it a bad show,
Well, here,
or
let
do you
me
kind of at
explain
least get what I'm
exactly
saying?
Like, Game of Thrones is the successful show that it is because it's not just an incredible show visually. It doesn't just have a great score. It doesn't just have fantastic actors and acting. It had an extremely compelling story. The writing in it was top notch, but it also, was based off of an incredibly successful and well-written source material that is A Song of Ice and Fire. Once it had to rely entirely on D&D, Dave and Dan, to actually start writing, what was going to happen to these characters once it, surpassed the books, that's where I think things went off the rails. That's where, and I will say that the reason this show was great, because I love all the other. The way I love the visuals, the score. I'm a huge score guy when it comes to this. So yeah, that was top notch. But the thing that keeps me coming back to the show is the story. And the story was extremely rushed and just poorly executed for its characters. And characters made nonsensical decision making. Armies appeared and then were destroyed, and then somehow their entire forces reappeared. Dragons were vulnerable and then invincible from episode to episode. The universe lost all of its weight in terms of realism in this last season. I would say that even the season before it certainly had some glimpses of that, but this season was all like, this is not grounded in the reality that like it had been building, at least from seasons 1 through 6.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I hear that's a common complaint. A couple things. One, a lot of people like. I mean, I agree that I don't know if it went off the rails, but I do think like the quality in the writing and some of the character, the authenticity of some of the character relationships, maybe kind of was not as good from seasons 6, 7, 8, at least 7 and 8 for sure. But the thing, I guess, also like I've read. Also, this is I think is worth noting. I've read all the books. Ryan, you've read all the books, right?
Yep.
And Vince, you've read some of the books or all the books? I don't remember.
I've read all the books.
Okay, so just everyone listening, we're coming at this from perspectives of people who've read the books. In any case, like I love the books, obviously, and just to flaunt my hipster card, like I was reading the books way before the shows were ever even a dream of becoming shows, right? Like, so sure, I love the books, but let's not like kid ourselves. The books had some major flaws. I mean, books 4 and 5 were pretty awful. Like in terms of just like compelling stories, they were pretty bad. And I remember even when talking about with my friends, most people didn't even really like book 2 that much. Really, it's book 1 and 3 that everyone thinks of when they say that books are so good. So, like, yeah. I mean, I get that, yeah, you're right. It is no longer a blueprint that the writers of the show could go off of, but the books were never, like, some, like, glorious perfection of, like, narrative design. They had flaws even before the show started. So, I guess I guess the idea that like, oh, it's the writers of the show, they're not having to turn to George R. R. Martin. Like, he's just one man. I hate to think that he's like the end all be all of storytelling. He's pretty flawed, and a lot of the stuff he writes is not always perfection.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are some interesting points. I think if you kind of do like a Venn diagram of, or I don't know, some kind of chart, but if you take the source material from the books, and he's had time to think it out and write it down, and he knows where he's taking these characters, I think it has a lot of the integrity for the story and the characters that prevail throughout the book series. And the shows take that strong structure and strong narrative and strong characters and kind of are able to smooth over some of those gaps that you pointed out in the storytelling, Sean, where in books 2 and 4 or whatever, where it's not quite as interesting or the stories themselves are kind of lackluster, they're able to kind of smooth those things out because they have this advantage of kind of like, I don't want to say hindsight, but they're able to kind of see those flaws in the story, make them better, but still gain all that integrity, bake them into the show because they know that ultimately this is going somewhere for these characters and stories. So when we get to, we'll say half of season 6, I don't know, kind of split the difference on that one, and then 7 and 8, we lose, as Vince indicated or has said, we lose the strong narrative we had going in from George R. R. Martin, and I think we still gain the great cinematic adventure, the music that Vince, we all love, and the actors, right? Those are all the things that make a show really, really good, or can, but we lose some of the strong, I think, story arc and character arcs that we thought Martin was taking us to. And I don't know, we can kind of maybe point fingers as why that fell apart. I will say that because we didn't have source material that was well thought out. That would be my stake, but
I have a very, very strong idea of why. So, I mean, when Dave and Dan approached George R. R. Martin about this, and I think from a certain point when they knew that they were going to surpass the books in terms of their show, like it was just not possible for him to finish. And once George R. R. Martin told them certain character beats and where characters were going to end up in the end game, they had to then they knew what was going to happen with those characters. And so I just felt like once it surpassed the books, certain characters just had plot armor that they didn't have before, and like the show just felt like, it always felt like everybody was vulnerable in this show up until a certain point when it felt like they no longer were. And characters were somehow able to survive things that they never would have been able to survive before. It just didn't feel like the show that it had been building up to for all these seasons. Characters now were able to get out of situations that that defied logic. The logic that had been built into the universe. And because of that, I say that that's poor writing.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, to kind of comment on that, I actually do agree with you on this point, Vince. The end of season 6, I believe, they unceremoniously execute Littlefinger in
season 7.
Yeah. Was that season 7? Oh yeah. Well, there you go. Anyway, which I thought was, again, I like the word unceremonious because he's a character that's taken us from the very beginning of the show, and in some ways really caused a lot of the harm and the cascading effects of the entire events of the show.
Absolutely.
And they just kind of like do away with the character because I felt like they couldn't figure out a good way to end him. But maybe it was appropriate. Regardless, when Jaime comes to Winterfell, someone who is known to be a horrible person, I mean, in terms of the eyes of our, the Stark, we'll say. And he's just like, it's cool, dude. You're fine. Whereas I think in previous seasons, that would not have been fine, right? He would have been killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, small note, I think, Vince, a lot of the stuff you're saying in terms of like these things, I think to me those are more, and I'm not trying to sound condescending or anything, but are more plot issues than story. I think the story still has the same fidelity as the story has always had. I think it's where the plot is where the things start to deteriorate a little bit in the latter seasons. By which I mean, I think the story is, if you kind of think of the story as just like the broad overarching, what is this about? What are these journeys these characters are on? I think those are still strong. And I think that's why, to me, it still works for me, because to me, the story doesn't suffer. But the plot, I agree, the plot, the details, the specific beats of what happens, that's when things, like, you're right, it loses the sense of kind of groundedness that I think we had all grown accustomed to, and what kind of the show felt like it was special with.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this from the beginning. I didn't think it was possible that, like, the White Walkers being the ultimate threat could possibly lead to a satisfying conclusion just with what we've had so far, because the villains that have been in Game of Thrones, like, a lot of them have been really fantastic, great villains that, like, man, you really wanted to hate them, and, like, they did such horrible, evil things, like, out of malice. And the Night King is just this, like, silent, omnipresent force of nature that just, sure, you can tell that it's a threat, but you never really felt like an emotional, like you never really felt like, God, I despise this character, because it wasn't a character. Having like and I know the Night King turned out to not be the main villain, but when you hype it up for 7 seasons, that the Night King certainly is the main villain and the greatest threat that this universe has ever faced, and then it turns out that that's not, like, the actual progression of the plot, and that there's still more to this, and it just felt like it didn't. The show itself acknowledged that it couldn't find a way to end the show, like, in a satisfactory way, with it just being the army of the dead versus the living.
So, okay, so this kind of gets into an interesting topic, because, well, one, for me, I had no issue with that, because to me, the Night King was never the ultimate, and I never wanted him to be. To me, he never was. And I'm not saying you're wrong to think that, but I think it brings into an interesting point, and I think this is what you kind of tapped on earlier, either Ryan or Vince, and that is expectations, right? And what our expectations are going in. And how valid our expectations are when we're judging how things turn out.
Okay.
And it's just kind of an interesting take, because, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong or anything, or that those are valid kind of or invalid expectations, but, like, to me, he was never a character that I wanted. Like, he was an existential threat, and that's what he represented. And to me, it was just a manifestation of that in a singular person. It was never about some ultimate evil that the forces of good had to overcome. I mean, that's Lord of the Rings. If that's what that was gonna, and Game of Thrones from the very onset has made it clear that this is not a typical fantasy where the forces of man will come together to fight evil. Like, that's not what I was expecting from the show. It's not what I wanted from this show or from this story. So that's why, I mean, like, expectations, I didn't mind that wasn't the final battle. I was happy that was not the final battle, in fact.
Yeah, no, I think that you hit it right on the head there, because I see Game of Thrones as more a tragedy of man. It's not. Yeah. It isn't a fantasy story of good versus evil. It's exactly. We define our perceptions of good and evil based on the characters we like, and I think that's kind of. I hope we get into it, but I think that's kind of where the show ends, is with that idea in our minds, at least for me. And I think that's what Game of Thrones has always been about. So I think they hit it on the head in terms of kind of keeping true to their I guess the story in that sense, that at least that theme.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to get into more of that, but just while we're still talking about kind of the Night King, I also do think, though, that, and this is another question, like, for all you issues you may have with season 8, how much of that, like, are you willing to put all in season 8 or on previous seasons? Because, I mean, they didn't really introduce the Night King till, what was it, season 4? 3 or 4?
Season 4. Yeah,
season
4 is
right?
when you first see him. Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't claim, like, well, they already started making mistakes back in season 4 because they should have never built him up as a singular like, you know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, but I mean, the first scene you see White Walkers. Like, the White Walkers are established from the very beginning.
But I'm saying that the idea that, like, the ultimate bad guy, it's they obviously made a decision in season 4 to make it a singular person, right?
Oh yeah, which
and,
is stupid.
And if they knew at that point that he wasn't going to be the ultimate bad guy, was it a mistake in season 4 to make him a bad? Do you kind of get what I'm saying? Like, I guess what I'm saying is that some of the faults of season 8, I think ultimately kind of are kind of stretched out back into previous seasons.
Sure. Of course, yeah.
And that doesn't excuse it. I'm not saying that's like justifies it, but I do think that like I don't think all of the flaws of the show rest on like these 6 episodes.
Yeah,
right.
But I mean,
I see what you're saying. It's like we blame the payoff. It's like
exactly.
I don't know.
We blame
like,
the payoff for an expectation that they kind of either wrote themselves into a corner way earlier, or wrote themselves in a corner because they didn't know how it was going to end based on what they had from Martin at the time, or I don't know, whatever circumstances.
Right. It's like if someone, if your kicker misses the game-winning field goal, you're gonna look at that as like, oh, we would have won if you had made that field goal. Like, yeah, but if you had
scored 3 more touchdowns or didn't have 2 interceptions, then you wouldn't be in this position.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's why I think that the first, 3, maybe I would say the first 4 seasons are absolutely the most compelling part of the show. Like everything after season 4, once you start getting to these other external threats, because once you have season 5, you get Hardhome, and then season 6, you get, all the stuff with the 3-eyed Raven and Bran, and like once you start having these other things outside of just like the political, like the wars that go on between men and like the humanity of the series, it starts getting past that. I feel like the series, goes downhill. It's not as compelling. It's not as like the storyline isn't as realistic. It's just everything. Like I get that like there's magic in this universe. I just feel like at least for those few seasons, it was still grounded in like a really good sense of like realism, and like I understood like how things were working, and I never thought that like just with how the universe was established that it could have a satisfying ending. So my expectations weren't high for like how I thought it would finish. But that doesn't excuse the way it was done. It was extremely rushed, the way that it took care of characters that had been there for 8 seasons, and how characters moved around the universe. And
I mean, that one I go back and forth on a lot, like because I do like I think I had more of an issue with it in season 7, and now I think it's more of just kind of like yeah, I get it. What are they like in season 1 when it's grounded? It takes them 2 episodes to walk down to King's Landing. Okay, cool. Season 1, we're getting to know the characters in this world stuff. I don't want 2 episodes in season 8 them traveling on a boat.
No, I would 100% agree with that. However, I think they need to still make us suspend a disbelief, right? Like, they don't need to show me that character, but you can't have them teleport either. Like,
well, I get, that's why I'm saying season 7. I think I had more issues because I think in season 7 is more egregious the time span, but I don't think in season 8 there was any indicator that it was like the next day they were there. No, like, and I think the way they filmed it, it made it seem like it was short, but weeks could have gone by the time they got to Dragonstone.
Right, yeah. Like there was never a moment in season 8, I don't think, where I was like, "Oh, that's convenient. They just arrived." No, I felt like they show us there's a cut, and an indeterminate time passes, and it shows them again. Okay, great. Whereas in season 7,
Gendry runs for like 2 hours, and he's back south in Winterfell or wherever, Castle Black. 500 miles away. Yeah, I mean, those are the issues. I agree that's where it undermines it more for me, and that's where I'm kind of going at. Like, to me, season 8 wasn't as disappointing in that regard. To me, there was less of that in season 8 than I think people are kind of like pointing fingers at it for.
Yeah, I agree with
that. What else? Well, okay, so this is kind of interesting. And this is a very hypothetical, impossible question to answer, but everyone's disappointed or going to be disappointed with it. I mean, I'm not, but the haters out there and people who just were like, and you said, Vince, yourself, I knew I was going to be disappointed with the ending, like, or the ending wasn't going to be satisfying to me back in season 4 or whenever you like.
No, I said
what would have been satisfying. Like, how would you have wanted it to end? And I'm not, I'm not saying this, as any right or wrong thing. I'm generally curious if you had any just general thoughts. Obviously, you don't have to get into specific details, but like for everyone who's so unsatisfied with how things ended or this season, what did they want? would
Sure.
they? And if it's just character stuff, we'll get into that. But is it an actual difference in how it ended? And that's what I'm curious about.
Major parts to characters and how they ended. Yes. How like the Bells episode was executed. Yes. How the Long Night was executed. Yes. So I mean, like pivotal moments in the series where major characters die, and where characters have their major turn, as a person to where they turn from good to mass murderer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
so that's why. Sorry. Let me clarify. So assuming those character turns were more motivated or whatever, I'm just saying specifically, like, would you have been happy if Varys lived? I don't care right now. I don't care about the motivation. I'm caring about the very specific. If you're writing it down, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, how would you have changed? What is there something that you like? Oh, that was dumb. Jon should be king. That's how I want it to end. Or you get what I'm saying? We'll get into the character motivations in a second. I'm just curious.
I
if there's
actually don't
anything...
have a problem with Bran being king. I have a problem with Daenerys' turn because I don't feel like it was.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We'll get to that in a second. I'm just saying, like, is there anything with how it ended, just the way it ended in terms of where the characters ended up, that you were unsatisfied with? Right now, disregard the turns and the motivations that got them there.
Yes, I got one. Okay. It honestly doesn't make any sense why Jon was exiled to the Wall, and it honestly doesn't make any sense with exactly how the universe was established within the last 20 minutes. Let me explain exactly how. So, and they make.
Sorry, real fast.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, but I'm saying, like, if you before you started the season or the last episode, if I had told you Jon ends by going back to the Wall, would you have been disappointed with me just knowing that? Would you have like, oh, okay, I could see that being cool?
No, especially with how the season ends.
So Jon ending at the Wall, no matter what, no matter how he got there, to you is bad.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, cool. Ryan, it sounded like did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the way you framed it was good, because I was gonna say, if you're watching the prequel series, you can't be upset when Anakin becomes Vader, right? Like, it's just more, we were upset with how he became Vader.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's interesting, because I do think there's a difference too between people being upset for what happened, like they didn't like what happened. And to me, that is less of a critique of it, and it's just more personal preference. Like, I didn't want the Red Wedding to happen. No one wanted that to happen. But I can't say it was bad. It wasn't a bad story.
Extremely well executed. But that's the thing, is that stuck with me emotionally. Nothing like Dany's burning down of King's Landing.
Yeah, and that's what we'll get into now. But I just wanted to separate those two. Like, to me, Jon ending the Wall, I liked Jon ending the Wall. And now whether you felt it was strong how he got back there, that was what we'll get into. But to me, that was, I thought I liked that ending. If you had told me at the beginning of the series ends with Jon, north of the Wall on his own. Okay. It would have been like, oh, okay, that's going to be interesting. It sounds kind of bittersweet. How does he get there after everything? I could see being, okay, that's an interesting ending. I want to see that ending. So that, I guess that's what kind of I'm trying to articulate here.
Okay.
But yeah, so let's get into the character stuff then, in terms of getting people to where everything turned out. We'll kind of jump around, but let's just hit the biggest one first, and that's Dany.
Yeah, that was silly.
What do you think about season 5? Well, her being dead, but episode 5 specifically, the turn, quote unquote.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I was talking to a friend about this, and I can't believe I'm about to use Revenge of the Sith as a positive example. But like when Obi-Wan confronts Anakin on Mustafar after he's like, you've done all these terrible things, and then they actually have a back and forth, and they know that they're kind of against each other, and then that they're gonna have to fight each other based off of their now established beliefs, instead of Jon just stabbing her and that being it. It just it somehow was better. It was almost the exact same in terms of where the characters were at, emotionally, from Revenge of the Sith and what happens between Dany and Jon. But the way it was executed, where there wasn't enough of a clash in terms of the characters and why they thought the way they did. I feel like the majority of like Jon's character was fleshed out between him and Tyrion in the scene before. And I would have really enjoyed to have that. And not that I don't like having a scene with Tyrion and Jon, but I would have much preferred to have that scene be more of an elongated dialogue between Jon and Dany as to why they got to where they were.
I would agree with that. I could see that. Yeah, I think that right, because the argument it happens between Jon and Tyrion, with Jon kind of playing devil's advocate. Mm-hmm. Whereas no, let's hear it from Dany herself. Let's see her emote her point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I could see value. I did want more from just the dialogue. That I don't necessarily think that it needs to be longer, but I was hoping for a little bit more. But I think to me the Jon Tyrion stuff was important and really good, because to me it was Jon knew the answer. It was just him having to come to terms with that, right?
Which is why I say playing devil's advocate, because he always believed what Tyrion believed, right? Yeah. He needed to, I don't know, hear it from someone else, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think also, like, as much as you kind of, I always wanted to like Jon and Dany as, you know, a couple. I don't know if it just never really fully realized itself on screen in the way that I think the showrunners wanted it to.
Yeah.
And I don't know who to blame. I don't think there's any one thing to blame, because I like Kit Harington and Emilia Clarke as actors. I think they're both really great. I don't know if they didn't have chemistry or what. Like, just the last 2 seasons, it never felt like this was some epic love. And so that notion of, like, him having to kill this epic love didn't quite hit that note that I think they were hoping for.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Because what is it? Is it season 6 that ends with them sleeping together?
Yeah.
No, it's season 7.
No, it's season 6.
No, it's not. It's season 7.
Is it? Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, because they go to... Yeah, that's right. They go to Winterfell. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so after that, I was like, oh, wow, that was a good way to end that season. And I thought they were going to pick it up at those same notes, with them just being totally in love and being, like, determined together. Like, I would have loved to see Jon... We're getting into specifics of, like, oh, I would have done it this way. But anyway, I would have loved to see Jon kind of picking up her energy and her fire, and kind of just, like, going, like, yeah, this is what we need to do. And kind of maybe even get wrapped up in together, like, kind of, you know, not like a seduction, but maybe like a seduction with each other, and kind of getting... And then Jon kind of is himself a little bit spiraling, and it's like, is Tyrion or someone, or Sansa or whatever, has to kind of rein him in a little bit and say, you know... And then he realizes and becomes, you know, then it would have been like, yeah, they were, desperately in love with each other and infatuated and felt it more, rather than Jon always being reluctant and
I definitely agree. I think that the kind of the nature of this season, those first 2 episodes, as slow as they were, there wasn't enough of that kind of gestation period where we got to see that relationship grow into something we conceived as this epic love. Like, yeah. And they kept telling us it was, but it never really felt like it was. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, in terms of him being the one to kill it, I think that still works for me, even without that epic love. But I just think it would have been stronger if they had been more successful in building that.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying before, Sean, like, in terms of, you know, Sean, you tell me episode 1 that, oh, Jon kills Dany at the end. I would have been like, oh, dang, that's awesome. That's tragic. Yeah. That seems like the most appropriate thing. The whole series is called A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's not a triumphant love song. It's a sad ballad. It is a tragedy. I mean, I kind of framed this whole series as a tragedy in a lot of ways.
And in a lot of ways, I think, to me, I break it down by character almost. But yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, yeah. That's fair. But given that the story is called A Song of Ice and Fire, I frame it around Jon and Dany in terms of being the characters that personify those elements or whatever. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So here's how I would make the bells better.
Okay, so the bells. So that's what so we're just talking about kind of Jon killing Dany, but like episode 5 specifically. So I know this was, most people, from people I talked to, hated this episode, and I'm guessing it's just because of the Dany's turn. And to me, this was my second favorite episode. My favorite episode was actually, I'd be curious to get how you guys rank the episodes this season. But my favorite episode was the last episode. then the 5th episode, then I think the first episode maybe, then Battle of Winterfell, and then episode 4, then episode 2. I don't know.
Episode 2 is my favorite, which is
really
funny. Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, I love episode 2 in terms of what's going on, but I wish they just put it all in episode 1. It was 2 episodes are kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Exactly. They were mushed together in my head. I really don't know what happens in either one of them.
Yeah. In any case, so episode 5, the bells. Yeah. So I'm guessing, Vince, how did you feel about Dany's turn?
I mean, to be honest, I didn't necessarily have a problem with the fact that she, like, the idea written on paper of her burning down King's Landing the way that she did, I get, but not how it happened from the buildup of, what's gone on in season 8. There needed to be more of a gradual decline in her sanity, because it just wasn't there. Her, characters were starting to question her sanity when she was making totally rash and understandable decisions. Her burning the Tarleys when she gave them every chance to just, bend the knee and, not have to burn, when she was just like, look, you guys can just, do this instead. I'm giving you an out. And they chose their fate. I mean, that's just how war is. I just feel like characters, from all sides, including her council, which includes Varys and Tyrion and Jon, and, people said that she was declining mentally, but we never saw that decline. And so, they might have been oh, we knew, this was gonna happen, and oh man, oh shucks, it did. But we as the audience never saw that.
Well, here's my counter to that, Vince, because I think you're right in terms of showing us in season 8, right there on camera. I think what they should have done, this would have been kind of cheating, is that Tyrion recalls the events of the past X number of years, Dany's conquest or campaign, if you will, and he recalls her just completely massacring "quote unquote" evil men as she made her way across Westeros, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that what they could have done, again, cheating, is before this episode in the recap thing, show her doing all those things and remind us all, hey, Dany is actually kind of a terrible person.
They did an interesting thing in that preview episode. Is they did something that they've never done in a recap. Is they played audio. Do you remember that? And it was just zooming in on her face, and they were playing audio of all these audio clips of her doing those things. So they almost kind of did what you're saying, but not quite. But I did note it. I did think okay. I don't think they've ever done that before in a recap. But like you said, it probably wasn't enough. Although, again, right. I don't know if you could rest character stuff on recap episodes or not. Or recaps.
Well, no, that's why I said it would be it would be a bad idea overall. Yeah. I don't actually advocate for it, but I think maybe if they had shown us, I don't know, given us some reminder, or I think, Vince, you're also correct in that in just season 8, maybe kind of cheat a little bit and show more of a steeper decline. Because I think that's one of the whole points of this final thing is Tyrion's chat is that, look, she's always kind of been this way. It just so happened that we were on her side. Whatever the winners write history or whatever, how it goes. And it just so happened that now she came to Westeros and she's killing our people, quote unquote, our people as in, the Westerosians. And we're kind of like, wait a minute, don't do that. I think I'm not saying that her burning down an entire city is the same as her killing, she mostly just killed the leaders of the previous conquest, so it's not quite the same thing, but it kind of is. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's one or two things that I think small things that I think could have helped this. One, I think they should have killed Rhaegal in that episode while they were assaulting King's Landing. Or Rhaegon, sorry. Rhaegon. I don't think they needed to kill Rhaegon in the previous episode.
His name of the dragon's name is Rhaegal, yeah.
It is Rhaegal, okay. Mm-hmm. I think they could have killed him while she and Drogon are assaulting the King's Landing, and if he dies, right, there was nothing gained from killing Rhaegal in the previous episode because they killed Missandei in the previous episode, which supposedly motivated her to anger.
Exactly.
Enough, right?
Also, so the fact that they established that a dragon was vulnerable to like just a couple of scorpions on Euron's boats. and then there's 100 boats in the Bells,
Yeah.
and there's scorpions lining the walls of King's Landing, and they do nothing to one dragon. It just felt so like, what?
To me, that was a matter of, it was because Dany was pilot, like she was controlling, like she was on Drogon. Unmanned dragon is nothing compared to Dany on Drogon. Now, whether the show conveyed that or well, but in my mind, I didn't have as much of an issue with that, I guess is what I'm saying. Dany on a dragon is essentially a super weapon, and a dragon alone is powerful, but it's not nearly the same thing as a dragon rider.
I'll agree with both of you, actually, but I think to me, having Rhaegal die during the attack on King's Landing would have been a better motivator for the audience to convincing them of Dany's
and let me say one.
And...
I totally agree with that, but also I think it needed to be more tragic in the way that that the events happened. I think, I know that we see this a little bit, where she's burning down King's Landing, and you see the bits of wildfire start going off. So you see just like the bursts of the green. To be honest, I think that's actually what needed to start triggering the destruction. And here's one thing why. I think that Dany should have been
doing more circumstantial kind of at first.
Yes, doing what she was doing, burning down, taking down the soldiers, which completely justified. They're soldiers, they're trying to kill, her side. And then she accidentally ignites the wildfire that starts burning down the whole city. Because one, it would show that, she was doing her best to stay true to her values and not destroy the city and not, waste civilian lives. But the mistakes of her father, who was the one who put stashes of wildfire everywhere, still, haunt her and still, dictate what society thinks of her. And so it's the mistakes of the Targaryens of the past that end up burning down the city. And I still would have been okay with Jon, not quite understanding what happens and him ending up thinking that Dany did exactly what did happen. And he goes to kill her anyway.
Well,
I mean,
no.
I think I would have been fine with that. I think that's an interesting idea. I think to me, if that happened, I think the more interesting thing would be her just owning it, even though it maybe not started her fault, but then just owning it and not being repentant about it. I think then you could still have I think, I'm just saying, if you went that way, it's an interesting thought.
Well, but Vince wants to rewrite it. I mean, that's what he's advocating, is that Jon kills her out of ignorance, which I think makes
that's what I'm saying. I don't think
less worse story.
Yeah,
is that characters acting out of ignorance, especially when it's the climactic thing of the entire series, not a strong ending.
Yeah, unless you're Anakin Skywalker, which we all know worked out well for him.
Them banishing Jon beyond the wall did not make any sense logistically with how they established the rules of the end of the universe as well.
Maybe. Well, I want to, before we move on, because I kind of still have a lot to say about Dany. Because, because I completely understand what you're saying, but to me, the reason I like that episode so much, and why that turn, we call it a turn, I don't know, is because it was, to me, that was the exclamation mark at the end of the sentence of what Game of Thrones has been about. And to me, everyone's called, she went mad. She became the Mad Queen. And I think it's subtle, but she didn't become that. She was never mad. Dany did not go insane at the end of the show. That's not what happened. That's not what the show is about. She was who she always was. And you definitely hit this a lot already, Ryan, and Tyrion was saying. But I think that is an important distinction to make. This idea that she snapped and went crazy. If people think that's what happened, I think it's misinterpreting the events of what happened. So to me, that's why it works so well, is because the entire series was building this. Who cares about season 8 if the last 4 episodes weren't convincing that she was going crazy? No, she wasn't going crazy. We've spent 8 years seeing her become this person who thinks that she is destined to be the person in charge of everyone. Anyone with that mindset, I like Dany, don't get me wrong. I liked it when she burned the slavers, and you like it when she's doing all this stuff. But that's what the enemy of the show is. Not Dany, it's not Cersei, it's the Night King. It's this idea that power is somehow, is a right of certain people to rule other people. And so when Dany did that, when Dany burned King's Landing, that was the show finally saying, look, this is what we've been saying this whole time. Do you get it? Do you get it? And if anything, it was maybe a little too obvious, but apparently it wasn't, because people are still like, oh, she went crazy. Like, in my mind, no, she didn't go crazy. That's who she always was.
Yeah, actually, I was talking about this with a friend and saying which characters actually grew or changed or were dynamic in the show. And I don't necessarily count Dany amongst them. I mean, she might be kind of a round character in that she has shown humor and love and rage, and she has lots of sides to her. But I think, she has always kind of had this in the back of their head that she was destined to rule. And I think it would be fun to kind of go through each character and see what you guys thought about each of them. But I would count Sansa amongst the few that are truly like dynamic characters that have grown.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think definitely the one that stands out the most to me.
Yeah, and that's why I chose her first. I think we could talk about other ones, but...
well, let's jump back to Jon real fast. Unless you have... I mean, sorry, I was kind of going on a rant there, but unless you have, I don't know, any other thoughts on Dany, just in terms of kind of like that, kind of her specific turn, and any other issues with how that went, and then kind of how the fallout from that happened?
Sure. I'll agree to a certain extent that, like her mindset of thinking that she's destined to rule is horribly flawed in nature, and like that's obviously somebody who's horribly egotistical, power hungry. I get that, but her, at least in terms of like the actions that she took, every action that she took where she would harm another person, there was always a rational reason behind it. Like, let's say when she murdered all the masters of Yunkai, it was to liberate the slaves. Burning down, and killing hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children, it was the only time that she had done something, an act of such violence that had no real justification. And I will disagree with you with saying that it wasn't just that it was somehow like it. For me, it was a very swift turn, and it only occurred once the bells started ringing, and which I think again is exactly why the episode is called The Bells, because obviously she had that moment to where once the bells were ringing, the army surrendered. She had then had a choice to not make that action, but then you see her character just emotionally start to just decline rapidly in that one scene, and then she just decides to go about it anyway. So it was her mentally just completely...
Yeah, I'm saying I'm not saying there wasn't a progression. I'm just saying it wasn't her going insane, or it wasn't you could even say she snapped. Yeah, I get that in terms of that, something like just kind of pushed a little bit further than she had been before. But I guess to me, it wasn't out of nowhere. Like, this was just the natural progression of where she had been going this whole time. So you're right, she wasn't burning innocents 2 seasons ago, but that's where she was going. And if it wasn't King's Landing, it was going to be, Dorne, or it was going to be the Iron Islands. Like, to me, this had to happen, and it was always going to happen.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying that that's the right answer, that's the right thing, and if you disagree, that's fine. But I guess that's why I'm saying in my mind why, to me, that episode worked and why that moment worked.
Right, because she says that, our work isn't done here. Her campaign is going to keep going on. She's going to kill plenty of more people because she believes she has the right to do so.
Mm-hmm. Which that idea was not established. There was no intentions of liberating the entire world outside of just that one scene in the very last episode of the show. The Iron Throne was always endgame.
I'm not sure where, I mean, I get, the kind of totalitarian imagery and all that stuff, and it worked for the intent and stuff, but I did think that was a little bit more heavy-handed, but I think, I'm almost curious if, that's one of those things where I was talking about earlier, where she just has to own it. She knows what she's done. She's not, naive or anything. She knows that she went further this time than she's done, but she also believes, they're right in saying that she believes she has the right to do this. So at that point, if you really believe that, you own it, right? And so you then go further than you've been before. I have mixed feelings about that scene for sure.
Okay.
Where she's saying she's going around to liberate the world. Yeah. Anyways, but yeah. So what we were just saying about Jon. So logistically, it just didn't work. In that last, when he's sent north of the wall.
Oh, it doesn't make any sense. And let me explain, because I've done it before and it's hilarious actually when you think about it.
You've gone north to the wall before.
No, but also, did you guys see the water bottle that was in the small council?
I didn't when we were watching the episode, but I have seen articles
of
it since. I feel like that was a callback too. The Starbucks was a setup to payoff.
Yeah, it was
what
a good
great
payoff.
That's the best payoff we've had in the entire series. But okay, this is why it doesn't make any sense, and why everyone's like, it's such a tragedy that you have to go beyond the wall, or you have to go to the wall. Okay. So they established that the North is now free and independent kingdom, right? They always say that now, Bran is the king of the 6 kingdoms, not the 7 kingdoms. The Wall is in the North. Sansa is the queen of the North, who decides everything that goes on in the North if it's a separate kingdom. She can decide that Jon isn't somebody who has to spend their whole life at the Wall if the Wall is in the North. It doesn't make any sense.
If the Wall is still, like, does the North own the Wall? Like, is it under jurisdiction of the North?
Everything past I don't know, the Twins is like, I don't know exactly what's considered the North, but once you get it's certainly beyond Winterfell, so it's in the North. It's the North.
That's not exactly how
a Night's Watch deserter gets executed by the Warden of the North.
They kind of run it, but that all, like, I think they're still sending people. All 6 kingdoms are still going to send people to the Wall, right?
Which also,
yes.
why?
Yes.
There's a big hole. Are they gonna fix it? I don't
they're
understand.
They're gonna fix the hole. What do you mean they're gonna fix the hole? Obviously,
patch that hole up.
How? The wall was constructed by magic. Who's gonna build it?
Don't worry about that.
We'll get the White Walkers to pay for it.
Not to mention, Tyrion says there's always going to be a need or a place for bastards and outcasts. That's the point of the Wall. Yeah. There you go. Done.
I mean, I see what you're saying, Vince. You're right. In terms of maybe the logistics of the show, I don't have an issue with it, though, because I think, to me, it works pretty much on every other level.
Yeah. Also, I would argue, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't matter too much, like you said. But I would argue that part of the stipulation, that whatever treaties they signed, was that Jon is an outcast and he's not allowed to return. Sansa can sign that. That's sovereign nations have treaties, and a international enemy of the state is, if this, like, we waged war, America waged war on many countries that gave amnesty or whatever to terrorists, right?
I don't understand, why is Jon now an international enemy?
Because he killed the queen. What do you mean?
He killed the queen who killed hundreds of thousands of people. Why is Jaime Lannister? Why wasn't he considered an international?
Whatever. That's the treaty they signed with Wormtongue. Okay.
Grey
Worm. Sorry, Grey Worm. Sorry.
Also, Grey Worm is the dumbest character now. I hate his face.
I'm not super happy with how that character turned out.
God, he should have died. He should have died against the army of the dead. It just made so much more sense, and he didn't. And
well, I mean, I get, I like, that's where kind of, like, the few little of those kind of supposedly motivational beats in episode 5, I felt like just slight tweaks might have played better. And I get that it was mainly because of Missandei that he became just like that, who he was in the end. But I don't know, it just, because then it's just Missandei motivating both Dany and
what do you guys think about this? What if instead of season 5 ending with Dany turning around and walking away, it ends with her going like, "Oh no, you didn't," and then she attacks right there.
And then it cuts, and then the next episode just
exactly.
Opens with, that would be exciting.
That would be freaking sweet.
Just like Jon and Davos are like, "Oh God, what? Just get this church start."
I would freaking love that. That would be cool. Like the best cliffhanger ever. And then that would also motivate the rage. And then she loses Rhaegal after the battle starts, like.
Yeah, and she loses him because of her anger that she just went in without thinking about. Yeah, I mean, I think that was probably, I agree, in terms of the character motivation, authenticity, logistics. Like, to me, the plot holes are not as big an issue as character holes. I don't know what they're called. I'm just going to call them character holes.
Explain to me.
That was one of the bigger
what the heck?
ones.
Oh, please explain in a nice 10-paragraph essay, double space. The build-up and the payoff that was the Golden Company.
Yeah, I almost felt like that was almost like
a joke. Yeah.
Kind of like poor Harry Strickland. Like, it's kind of, like I kind of felt bad for that guy.
Yeah.
But not
Also,
really, because
like,
what a jerk.
What
but
what was Cersei's? What was she doing this season? Cersei did
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, I mean that was almost like a weird thing. I almost felt like they only had Lena Headey for like or Headley, I don't know.
Lena Headey.
For like 3 days of shooting. I'm like,
You know, she was only in the show for like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Like,
and
for
it's just
season
her
8.
standing looking out from the Red Keep for like.
And she probably got paid $1
15 of those
million
minutes.
an episode. God, that's the sweetest gig. Oh, also, like, okay, so when Jaime and Cersei were hugging in the bells, and it looked like the entire thing collapsed down there, and then when
Yeah.
Tyrion gets down there, there's only like a couple rocks on him. I don't
She
know,
got
maybe
bonked on the head.
they just got head bonked. I feel like one of them. I actually was expecting one of them to be alive. I don't know why, but
I almost kind of was like as Tyrion's kind of lifting and he's staring at, and then you see like Cersei like start coughing or something.
which
Yeah, I was
expecting
kind of. I would have cringed so hard.
Yeah, I would.
I'm
happy.
I was
didn't
nervous
happen,
that was going to happen, but I should give more credit to the show writers.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Man.
I mean the thing again, like to me, yeah, okay, maybe visually, did they really die just by getting hit with a couple of stones? So it's like, yeah, but you get I get the point of that scene, and it still worked emotionally and character wise. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whether a giant stone fell on him or a whole bunch of smaller stones fell on him, to me, is kind of inconsequential.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
I think
that's I think partially. Maybe I'm being too apologetic, and I admit to that. For a lot of the issues with this season, is because a lot of the issues people have are those things, which I think are legitimate from a certain point of view. But from my point of view, as long as the character and thematic messages come across. And for the most part, they did. I'm willing to overlook those little minor silly things.
Yeah, they're there to serve a larger purpose. They're implementation details.
Well, okay. Anyway, what did you guys think of Jaime and Cersei and kind of how their stories ended? Were you satisfied? Did it work for you?
Yeah, I was very satisfied with it. I know there's a lot of predictions about Jaime he's gonna be the one to kill Cersei, but I think the way it ended was perfect. I think that's kind of with Jaime kind of being a tragic character. I think that's the way his character needed to end, and in a similar way with like Jon, where we want these heroes to rise to the occasion and be better than themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they are who they are, and they're flawed characters, and that's part of the reason why we like them. I think because they're human.
Okay. Do you think it matched up with Cersei's whole like prophecy though? You know how like she was supposed to get killed?
Nope.
It didn't, right? Isn't that kind of so? Is that kind of saying something that prophecy isn't everything, or?
Yeah, I mean, I like that how a lot of the things didn't live up to the prophecy, and I mean, maybe they could have kind of shoved that a little bit more in our, into the audience's eyes that, look, these prophecies aren't being fulfilled exactly. But I like that idea that, like, yeah, they're just stupid prophecies. I always dislike prophecies in fiction anyway.
Me too.
And so I like that they're kind of subverting those, and they're not always leading into this idea that, like, and like kind of even what Jon was saying, or was it Tyrion in the final scene, like, you think I'm blood and fire that I'm going to do this? Like, nothing's written here.
Yeah.
We make fate, destiny of what we make it. So I like that. And I do like Jaime's ending a lot too. Like you said, Ryan, he ultimately was a tragic character. And I think he exemplifies, this idea that like all the characters are a result of the choices they make. And that's kind of something that I guess you kind of want in all fiction for the most part. But like, I think this show, even in the stuff that in the season 7 or 8 that maybe didn't work for a lot of people, in terms of the motivations and stuff of characters, I still think that at least the choices they made resulted in where they were. Like, they had to live with those ramifications. And I think that was still true. And basically, yeah, he made his choice, and then the result of those choices where it led him to.
Okay.
So I think he embodied that.
Yeah,
well.
I mean, for me, it doesn't detract from like his whole arc throughout the course of 8 seasons.
Yeah.
Like, I think Jaime he's arguably up there, with Theon for one of the best arcs in terms of a character. And like, to me, I actually didn't really like his sex scene with Brienne. It kind of felt like it it didn't need to happen. I love the scene where he knights her. I feel like that was the high point of their relationship.
Yeah.
I feel like him like having sex with Brienne, it wasn't necessary for either of their characters. It just felt like it was there for fan service. Like, honestly.
I kind of see that, for sure. I do, yeah, the knighting was definitely the high point. That was essentially the real sex scene, was him knighting her. But I mean, like, it kind of similar. If you had told me at the beginning after I'd watched episode 1 or just started the first book that like Jaime and Cersei's story was going to end with them holding each other as this Red Keep collapses on top of them, I'm like, oh wow, that's crazy. That's really tragic and awesome. That's going to be like, and yeah, to me it worked with kind of how it all kind of culminates and where they've gone and their choices that led them there. So,
all right.
Speaking of other kind of choices, what do you guys think about Arya and kind of where she has gone and where she's going?
Yeah, I guess well, let's start at the very beginning of the season, or at least partially in the beginning. She has sex with Gendry.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then Gendry just falls in love. He's like, "Hey, be my queen." Or something. I don't know what he says, but he gets on his knee. I didn't know that proposals were a thing in this medieval society. I could have sworn that it was just like, hey, our houses are going to join. I didn't realize you got down on a knee. That's not a thing.
But what are the small folk? But
also, some people fall in love.
I get it, but it's just like you've never seen, when people get married, it's like, we're going to join our houses. You never see someone get down on a knee. Like, that's never happened.
Did Rob not get on one knee for What's-Her-Face?
He just like,
I feel like he would have.
Maybe, but he just like kissed her butt or something. I don't know. Like, that's actually a thing about it.
Instead of getting down on one knee in this world, you kiss her butt. That's the same thing.
I mean, anyway, Arya. Actually, talking about Arya.
Is that what we're talking about? I thought we were talking about butts. So, okay, go ahead.
I don't know. Give me both. With Arya being, I think, probably one of everyone's favorite character, it's hard not to like her, this kind of rising to badassdom and just, killing the Night King. I think that's something we can all be proud of her for.
I mean, I was very interested to see what they were going to do with her once it was clear that she wasn't going to be the one to kill Cersei. And I was just like, okay, so she's in King's Landing, and then she became like the focal point for the tragedy that was occurring. She was the one who was like the character that we were with as, people were getting burned alive. Miraculously, she survived, which I don't know how she did, but she found a way.
I also actually thought she might have actually died. I think a couple people thought that. I think I read a couple places online, but like that before season 6 aired, I was like, oh, maybe she was dead, that whole last little sequence with the white horse coming back.
Oh, I thought about that too. You mean episode 6, but yeah.
So at first I didn't really understand why she was such a focal point at the end of season 5 or episode 5. And I don't know if this was intended, but I'm kind of thinking about it more. To me, in a lot of ways, Arya is a foil. She's kind of on the same trajectory as Dany is in a lot of ways. And so I think it was important that they show these two characters that essentially have gone through in similar arcs and how at this point they kind of diverge. And it's also, I thought it was kind of cool just because from the beginning where of the show, of the story of her spending time in Flea Bottom and now returning to there and seeing it under different circumstances. So I think it worked on a couple different levels. And so for me, the character-wise, it worked because ultimately she chose not revenge. She chose not fire and fury. And so she lived, but she's still having to deal with other people's choices.
Yeah, I mean, then she's there at the forefront of seeing what happens when someone takes revenge to the ultimate level.
Yeah.
I didn't really look at it that way, but that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good too. My only, I guess, maybe complaint about her character was when it was episode 1, I'm not sure, where it shows her at Winterfell and the dragons are arriving and they're flying overhead, and she just has this smug expression on her face, like, "Huh, dragons? I've been a dragon before." And I was like, "All right, Arya, come on now, it's a freaking dragon. You're gonna be impressed."
Actually, yeah, I don't know if I didn't think that at the time, but yeah, Dragons are dragons. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean they're freaking dragons. Anyway, that's my only complaint about that.
But also, I liked. I mean, and I think hers was probably the most optimistic. Isn't the right word, but just the most like, yeah, kind of character climax, right? Like John is the bittersweet tragedy, and Sansa's the kind of like it's a happy ending, but it's not one without responsibility and weight to it. Whereas Arya is like, yes, she's kind of, you know, engulfing what she's always wanted. And I think that is, she's always been that character where you're kind of like, I don't know, there's a little bit of an unchecked joy with a lot of her character actions and beats. And for her to end on such a high note like that, I think was like,
right.
Well, it was true to the character.
Of all the characters, she's had the biggest sense of adventure, right?
Yeah.
And that's what she actually gets to do. She gets to go off and have an adventure. Everyone else has to go be adults.
Well, I think also, too, I liked how when it's kind of showing the montage of all of them kind of embarking on their final preparations, like, from where the show began, all of these characters in these circumstances, but not as a result of their own choices, and just forced into these situations. Of Arya going on this adventure and alone and struggle, but because of things out of her control. Same with Sansa being in this, you know, in the castle, being relegated to, you know, nobles and treachery and kind of political scheming, but not because she wants to. And Jon kind of going up north of the wall, but because he has no choice. And you could argue that he doesn't have a choice now, as in terms of being regulated to the Night's Watch as punishment. But what did you guys think? Do you think he's? I kind of got the impression that he's going off to be with the
that's what I got too.
Yeah,
right. So to me, it still kind of was a choice. Like they're all now choosing their own destiny, and they're there, even though they're kind of in similar situations as they were in season 1. They are now on their own terms.
Yeah,
that's
fair. Also, Jon is the 998th and the 1000th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Ed snuck in there, got the 999.
Oh.
He's like Grover Cleveland of the Night's Watch. 2 non-consecutive terms.
How'd you feel about Varys' death?
Mixed. I like Varys so much.
Yeah.
And
He went out like a dumb face.
Well, he went out better than Littlefinger.
He forgot how his brain works. Actually, I disagree with that. Varys went out worse.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, getting burned by a dragon it's at least visually, it's like kind of epic.
Or Vince, do you not mean logistically? Do you mean like he went out like a chump?
Character-wise, he went out like a chump. Like at least Littlefinger was like trying at the end to like use all of his tools of manipulation. Yeah, he was like Sansa. Okay, Army of the Vale. Okay, I demand all this, and it's like at least he was trying something. Varys was just like, did the little girl get to poison him? Nope. All right, I'm out. Like that was the dumbest thing ever. I mean, it was so stupid and like, oh.
I don't know why. Did he send the letters or not?
No, he didn't. He had to burn them.
But at the beginning of the episode, he wrote it, and then you don't see him. And
it also makes it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
now. It doesn't matter because apparently nobody in that council at the end even knows or cares that Jon is the rightful king. So,
Tyrion does.
Okay, Tyrion does. They sure didn't mention it in that meeting, so who even cares?
Well, here's the interesting...
Jon being the last Targaryen and being the rightful heir to the Iron Throne or the rightful king had no impact.
You mean in the final scene of the...
It had no impact on the season. What impact did it have on the season?
Oh.
What did it do?
Well, it undermined like Dany's character and made her feel isolated and progressed her... I feel that's what I'm saying. I felt it progressed her character.
And that's why Varys died also. What do you guys think about like Jon, like his, in terms of that little sequence of Varys, like Jon could have stopped that, right?
Yeah.
Easily. I mean, he could have done any number of things, of which he did none, and stood there like an idiot. And I think that's one reason why I think the ending for Jon is the most appropriate, because the whole time we keep wanting him to step up and be the hero that we think he is, right? He's a reluctant hero. When is he going to step up? And now that he's the last Targaryen, it's like, oh, you now also have this birthright to it. And yet he still never does. You know, he's still, and through his inaction, bad things come to pass. And that's why another reason why I think it's the most appropriate for his character, because evil was allowed to persist because of his inactions.
I'll be honest. Like, I'm always going to love Game of Thrones. But for me, the show ended at season 6 finale. Everything about
What was season 6 was like?
Everything that happens in season 6, like I think season 6 has a fantastic ending.
The Magar or the Baelor, Septa Baelor blown up.
Yes, so Septa Baelor blows up.
That
Cersei
becomes,
becomes
I think,
queen.
one of my favorite episodes.
Dany's coming to Westeros. Jon becomes king in the north, and you learn that Jon, he was his mom was Lyanna, all that. Like it was the best finale that I really could have asked for.
I
at
think
that
it might
point.
have been the best season finale, but again, that was after they're going off the books even. Right?
Yeah, that's why I was like that. I think season 6 might have been a fluke.
Well, honest, but this goes back to my question. Like you're saying, the show ended there, but if you just take the rest of the show, look at it as a history. If you just then this happened, forget any of the emotional buildup for those characters. Just imagine those things just happened. Would you be okay with it? Like, why would you not be okay with that?
Maybe okay, fine. Then I'm okay with it. But the execution is
that's
so
fine.
paramount. That's why we watch. I mean, if this entire season I was just reading a script, or I was just watching, if I was just looking at bullet points of how a season was about to happen, it's gonna be different. But the show is, set up such quality writing and fantastic execution of all that makes a TV show that it fell flat in the most important thing for a story, and that's its writing and its pacing.
I mean, we'll go back and forth. I still disagree, but I understand that people feel like that, and I don't think there's anything so much that either side could really convince them of that. What else?
Well,
character-wise,
where's Drogon going? Huh? Where the heck?
Going on
He's
adventures?
getting his own spinoff. All right,
Yeah.
He's gonna have his own little dragon adventure.
Also, why did he burn down the Iron Throne? What does he have against chairs? Does he know that chair represents?
He's jealous.
Everything?
He's always wanted to sit in one.
I personally love that scene because it was awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
sweet.
I mean, I kind of going back to Varys real quick. I do really like Varys. He's one of my favorite characters. But I kind of also feel like, I don't know if he had to die necessarily, but I still think he was, as much as he wanted the betterment of the realm, I still think he was in the wrong mindset too. And that is, he was all about, putting Jon as on the throne. But that's still the wrong, it doesn't matter who sits on the throne. That's the point. Just the notion that someone has, control and power all of these people. That's the real issue. And I think he never quite got that. And so to me, him dying sucked, and I wish he didn't. But I'm also kind of from a character and thematic point of view, it still kind of made sense to me. He still never got it either. As much as he was about, the betterment of the realm, he still didn't quite understand that it couldn't always, you can't rest it in one person's hand.
I don't think it's fair to say understand in this context, because prior to the last 20 minutes of the last episode of the entire Game of Thrones, the idea of anyone else but a king or queen ruling was not on the table. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can't say Varys, you idiot, you weren't progressively thinking in a democratic mindset.
I guess you're right.
That's not really fair, right? That's not fair to say.
No one in the show was. I hope the audience was. That's why I always, and I think people were, obviously. But yeah, you're right. I guess he shouldn't be held to a higher standard than everyone else in the show.
I mean,
right. However,
although
it does...
the Iron Islands, they have Kingsmoots. So,
Yeah, no, actually, although they're, horrible rapist pirates, at least they have the most democratic thing going on,
Yeah. That's true.
But they're also horrible rapist pirates. But, other than that part.
Yeah, you can't have it all on.
I did think it was funny how Sam was
but
like,
who
hey,
loves
what if
Euron,
we
guys? Am I right?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I mean, he's by far my least favorite part of the last two seasons.
I think he has one of the
I'm pretty
best
apologetic
character
to most
introductions.
things, as you could tell. But
Season 6,
what's
episode
that?
2, he has one of the best character introductions. And everything after that, his character disappoints. When you first meet him and it's a super crazy stormy night and Balon Greyjoy is walking across the bridge.
Yeah.
And he just sees him standing there in the darkness. You're like, oh my God, who's this guy? This is crazy. And then everything from there is downhill.
Well, I mean, I think it's the same. It's when you introduce a character who's supposed to be a pivotal character in the final act, even though of a story, you're always going to be like, what? I don't. Who is this guy? No one cares.
I mean,
Even
look,
if he was the greatest character ever, he had such an uphill battle.
Yeah. I
He
mean,
was
I'll be
never gonna
honest,
get
like,
there.
I did my best to avoid spoilers like I normally don't do because I'm terrible at not doing it, but I sure did read a lot of theories on how people expected this season to go down. And almost all of them seemed more interesting and a better payoff to the characters than what we actually got. Which is why I truly feel like Dave and Dan were just kind of phoning it in for this last season. They decided, several years ago, the last 2 seasons were just going to be 13 episodes. They had the story written. They're just like, that's it. We've been doing this show for 10 years. We want to move on. And now they have the reins to another Star Wars trilogy. So, I mean, like, I feel like they honestly just lost their love for writing this series. And they wanted to just wrap it up.
I can't speak to that, obviously, but that's all speculation. I seriously doubt that people who are in charge of a multi-million-dollar biggest show on Earth, the most watched show on television, maybe ever, like...
Oh, I can
we're
explain.
Over it.
Oh, I can totally see. This is probably... I think they got George Lucas syndrome. They had got 6 very successful and at least decently written. I'll say season 5 was maybe a little especially with the Sand Snakes and the Dorn plot, but at least 5 really good seasons up to season 6. And they had been so well recognized, the show had won 3 Emmys for Outstanding Drama. Who's going to question the writers of the biggest show in the world at that point? Who would question George Lucas after he's
But
made...
a writer's not looking at, like, who's going to question me. Like, hey, we finally proved we finally made them think we're good. Now we could give up. Like,
no, but
no
what I'm
writer
saying is
thinks
that
like
nobody...
that.
Yes, but I'm saying that... But they aren't going to be challenged as much for their decisions in the writing room as they maybe would have been, back in seasons 1.
Well, okay,
2.
maybe, but I think that's a different thing.
But also
to
they had
say.
source material that they could work off of. So, to be honest, when I think that once they had been working on the show for, the better part of a decade, and they no longer had the source material, and they kind of had to fill in the gaps for George R. R. Martin's stories and where the characters were going to end up, once they had to figure out how they were going to bridge that gap, because they had the beginning and the middle, then they just needed the last part to connect the end. I feel like that's where it relied entirely on them, and it just showed that they just were not quite up for the task.
But it didn't rest entirely on them, though, right? Like you said, they got the plot beats from George R. R. Martin. George R. R. Martin is a producer on the show, so
yes,
to
but for the last several
seasons,
silly. So for George R. R. Martin was actually a big part of the writing for at least seasons 1 through 4. It was after season 4 that he actually stopped being a writer, because there was actually, I think it was season 3. Each season he would actually write an episode.
Yeah, he wrote an episode.
Yeah, he stopped doing that once he realized, oh crap, they're catching up to my books. I better get back in the writing room. And we're in 2019. He still hasn't got Winds of Winter. But he was a big part of at least the initial few seasons of the show. And then he got less and less involved. And I feel like it shows in terms of the writing of its characters. I mean, I've rewatched the show, almost a dozen times. It's not like I have some sort of like nostalgia for the show that, like, man, that's just from your youngin' days. I've watched the show very recently, and the way that, like, characters interact, their dialogue, it's so different. It's just rushed isn't the right word. I don't feel like for this last season. It just feels lazy. Characters do not have the same. It's like what did Tyrion do these last 2 seasons? Like, his character had far and away a more engaging, interesting plot for seasons 1 through 4. Once he got past his plot, the books are completely different from his plot that he's going at now. But once he got out of Westeros, his story gets vastly less interesting.
Yeah, I think that you can kind of say that across the board a little bit. Once the world got smaller, so to speak, everyone kind of grouped up, and there was less things for people to do.
Yes, exactly. Which is why I feel like the season 6 finale is the best, because it still had 3 different groups of characters. Sure, there was a lot of characters that were interacting that never had, but you still had Cersei in King's Landing, you still had Jon in the North, and you still had Dany coming from Essos. It still felt like these 3 stories that you cared about each one for their own separate reasons still hadn't quite convened in a way. And so it felt like a good, like you could still feel a grand sense of scope for this universe. And it was still like, okay, I know that there's more story to be told, but man, it's really at the top of its game right now. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not saying that season 7 or 8, I think, is as good as the previous seasons. And I don't think even the most stalwart supporters or, lovers of this season, who I don't know who that is, claim that. I guess but kind of going back to what I started with, that like to call it a bad is so
well. No,
it irks me the wrong way. Like it's still better than 99% of everything on TV.
I only if I was to say it's bad, I'm not comparing it to anything else other than its previous seasons. I would say it's below the standard the show has set. I'll say that.
Sure. Okay. I mean, I can't argue with that. I agree with that. But
that's not great for a show that
does not justify a petition from 50,000 people.
Actually, it's over 2 million. It's 2 million people.
This notion that like people are slightly disappointed or it doesn't turn out how I read all these fan theories about how it should end. I don't care. Like, I'm not saying you, Vince. I'm just saying, like, people's fan theories, like, that's fun, but that doesn't mean that I'm, like, the show itself is bad. I don't know how to articulate.
No, I mean, just because things don't meet your expectations doesn't mean that it's not like noteworthy or worthy of receiving praise. I get that, and we all have our own personal biases going into the show. I think a lot of people care about this show a lot, and they really got invested in the characters. And when you care about something a lot, and all the good things have to come to an end, it's not easy to wrap them up in a way that's going to satisfy everybody. Like I get that.
Well, I mean,
it's almost
I think
impossible.
It is impossible. Speaks to just the nature of ending in general. Like like we might get into this a little bit in a bit here, but I did want to ask you guys about it down the line. But like just ending any show like this or any giant franchise, like there's so much emotion built up with that, and just by the nature of something ending, you're going to have negative emotions because your stories have ended. And sometimes there's this kind of conflict in my mind is like, are these negative emotions like am I associating them incorrectly with my emotions about the quality of the art itself? Like, am I making sure that I'm disassociating my feeling of this thing ending from how I feel about the way they ended it?
So that's a really good point, because I think if you're, I'm going to use two examples. I think they're really good examples for your exact scenario, Sean, and that's 30 Rock and Parks and Rec.
Mm-hmm.
Both of which I think had amazing endings. But at the end, I remember being upset, like, what? This is how it's ending? Both end in weird time jumps forward, which is kind of weird anyway. I usually don't like that. Again, in Lost, they do the same thing. I also didn't like that. We don't need to get into Lost right now. But
we should.
Well, anyway. And I remember being dissatisfied, but years have passed since those shows have ended, and I'm like, oh no, like I am able to now separate the immediacy of the show ending and those, Sean, like you said, negative emotions.
Yeah.
And like, no, those shows ended as best as you could possibly end them. Now, they're not the same scale of epic fantasy, but I think if we look to other things like Breaking Bad and Mad Men that are these prestige level shows, I think
Sopranos or Lost or like, right?
Right. Yeah, those would be accurate, or more comparable examples. But I'm just using 30 Rock and Parks and Rec as comparators because those are joyful shows, right? And I still had negative emotions regarding their ending.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah, that's a good point. That is, I hadn't thought about those. Like, it's interesting you bring in the comedy because I hadn't thought about that for sure. But yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying it's wrong either. I guess kind of what it reminds me of too a little bit, like, so this, I don't know if I've said this we've talked about this in the cast, but when you first started watching the show, Vince, you didn't watch it from the beginning. You didn't start it till like, what was it, season 2?
Yeah.
When it was on. So you were catching up, and I was kind of watching every once in a while when you would catch up. So I was watching the Baylor with you, episode 9 of season 1. I was watching that show. I was watching that episode with you. When that episode ended, you were so furious. You yelled, "F this show," and you stormed out of the house and slammed the door.
Yeah, I did.
Days later, you were constantly online talking to me about how bad the show was, saying, the show, you don't ruin your character. This is bad narrative design. It's bad character design that you get your audience associate with these characters. It's just dumb. It's just stupid.
To be fair, I was also only 19 at the time.
Well, I'm not saying you were wrong or right, but I'm just saying it reminds me of those same things. Like, you had a lot of negative emotions because it was something you cared about ending. This character you end, like, and I'm not saying you were naive or stupid to think like that. I mean, I remember when I read the book the first time and I read that chapter, I couldn't read the second book. I had to wait like a year till I could pull myself to bring and start reading the second book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and I don't know if people are willing to admit it, but I do think there's at least something there for the end of this season. And I'm not saying it's the same thing, and I'm not saying that means that it's as good as those moments that we look back on now and go, oh, wow, those were powerful moments. But I do think there's an element there where people's emotions are so tied up into this thing that they've been following for 10 years that, of course, there's going to be some, disappointment or negativity just because it's ending. Like, right. Yeah, it sucks.
Sean,
I know.
To your point, I think The Red Wedding probably had a similar reaction for a lot of the viewers and the book readers. And Sean, I remember you telling me the story of John Artisan having read the end of the fourth book, where something where he thought Brienne was killed.
You think that Lady Stoneheart kills Brienne at the end of book 4.
And I remember you telling me he threw the book across the room and said, "This is so stupid. I'm never reading this ever again." Yeah. And like I still remember that all these years. But people have strong connections to these things, and if it doesn't go exactly as they want, I guess, they're gonna have a negative reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that like that exonerates or anything or justifies any mistakes or whatever, but I do think that in some time, I think this will be looked at a little bit more positively. I could be wrong. I don't know. But I think at the very least, this last episode did a lot to kind of, if not fix any issues, then at least end it on a note that wasn't so steeped in that disappointment and negativity.
Okay.
I don't know. At least in my mind. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, maybe could be wrong. But even so, I mean... Even if this ends up being like if somehow it gets worse and people's opinions of this season and / episode get worse as time goes by, I still maintain that does not mean that it drags the rest of the show down or makes the show bad or makes the show worse or makes to me it still stands up for everything it was and did. Yeah. Despite I guess despite shortcomings in other areas.
The saddest thing about it is it really made me kind of I didn't feel a lot from the series finale. And that's the worst thing. I would have preferred to even just outright hate it. But I just didn't. I felt so emotionally disconnected just based with how the story happened for season 8 that it made me just kind of numb to what was happening. There was moments where it was almost pulling me back in, but I don't know, it's almost the worst tragedy that it made me kind of I was just so emotionally numb to what was going on that it was just okay, I guess this is what's happening. I kind of just accepted my fate while I was watching it, and I didn't love it and I didn't hate it. I was just a viewer of it, which is, in my opinion, the worst. Just not feeling like you have any human connection to what is going on. And that you're just watching something occur is worse than loving it or hating it.
Well, I mean, obviously it's worse than loving it. I don't know if it's worse than hating it, though. But, I mean, I mean, there were moments that I felt strongly about in the last episode. But it sounds like you kind of had that notion even before the last episode began, though, right? Is there anything the last episode could have done that would have changed that? It sounds like it was kind of a deal done and set before it even started.
Yeah, I mean, no. I would say it's not possible given the way that the plot progressed in Season 8. Yeah. The plot needed to be drastically changed. It couldn't have come to a good conclusion just with how the story progressed for the first 5 episodes. Although I will say that I was never more hyped up. Scale. I was never more hyped up for an episode than Episode 3, The Long Night. Because I felt like Episode 2 was a fantastic calm before the storm. And
Yeah,
it
I
was
do too.
that's
just
why
wish it
I
was
think it was the
all
best
in one
episode. Yeah, I get that why you'd think that, but I mean, like, it was, for me, it was like, that was the build up to what should have been the series finale, and that's not what we got. And I get that, like, there's, like, you know, the story, like, the story beats were not supposed to be about, you know, this force of nature that, you know, that humanity has to fight. It's more about, like, the conflict of man himself, and, you know, how weird, like, how war just has, you know, no purpose. I get that, like, there was a bigger meaning, and, you know, Dany burning down King's Landing had more meaning than, you know, them defeating the Night King. For me, it just wasn't as compelling of a story. I know
Yeah,
I might
mean,
not be. I might.
You can't convince someone, you know, how they feel about something. But so let's say, you know, he finishes books 6 and 7, and let's say, I mean, I think it's kind of an interesting case because in some ways he kind of is in their position now. He knows what didn't work and what does work, so he could change things.
Oh God, I hope Stannis just lives all the way and just takes the
end. And well, then he could change things and just claim like, oh, this is how it always was. After, like, you know, like, and he has the luxury of doing whatever he wants at that point.
Wouldn't that be hilarious if, like, it's completely different, not even close? Like, let's say Stannis does make it all the way to the end, and, like, Jon is just a whatever. He just dies, doesn't come back.
He doesn't come back in book 6.
Yeah, he doesn't come back. He's just dead. And Stannis...
But let's say it does. I'm just theoretically. Let's say it does play out in terms of the beats, in terms of the major beats, the same.
Okay.
Would you, based on what you're saying, you would still be disappointed, even if they built the characters up to those moments, even if it was more thoroughly fleshed out.
No.
But you're saying the fact that if they defeat the Night King or the forces of the undead before the assault of King's Landing, even in the books, you would be disappointed.
Oh, no. I don't know. That's not what I'm saying.
But you're saying that's not what you thought the
is everything.
Story was about. So then it's not the story, it's the execution.
Absolutely. Execution is more important, in my opinion. Execution is... because there were story beats that while I was watching it, you'll agree because you witnessed me having them, that I was like, what? How did this happen? But then when I actually had a chance to go back, rewatch it, and watch where this story went, I was like, well, no, that needed to happen for this story to be where it's at right now. And I was so engaged in it, because it was just such a devastating thing that happened to me emotionally. The beats...
Yeah, but I'm just saying that, like, you were just saying how you would prefer the ending be the Night King battle.
Yes, but thematically it would have made, in my opinion, more sense.
But I'm saying if George R. R. Martin finishes book 7 and the ending is not the Night King battle, but how it plays out in the show, you would be disappointed then.
It all depends on how it's written and how we get there. I feel like there's a good way for
that's my point, though, is that it's not so much that the Battle of Winterfell took place before the Battle of King's Landing in the show.
Oh, right? No, it's not. The battle, we didn't even really talk about the Long Night. That's a whole nother topic. We've already gone an hour and 40 minutes. The Long Night is, well, do you guys want to talk about the Long Night?
I mean, it's good. I like that episode. Like I said, I mean, it was only my least favorite.
You know what my favorite part was when the very beginning, all the Dothraki charge in, and then they're all dead, and then somehow when they fight King's Landing,
they come back. Jorah comes back with some of them.
Like 3 of them, and then also, do you watch the behind the scenes?
In a specific shot.
Did you watch the behind the scenes commentary where Dave and Dan said that's the end of the Dothraki? They literally say that. The writers of the show say that's the end of the Dothraki, and then somehow, in the Bells and also in the last episode, there's thousands of Dothraki left.
So do you think they forgot they
yes,
filmed them?
I'm not kidding. I think the writers are so stupid that they forgot what they are even doing with their own
So
characters.
You don't think that they're just owning kind of what's happening on screen?
No, I think they got straight up lazy. I honestly think they got lazy. That they
literally forgot that they paid probably $30 million
to
extras. They filmed an entire battle of a cavalry charging the gold. Do you think they literally
wouldn't be surprised
that?
If they're both like alcoholics and they were drunk when they were writing this, and they were just like, I don't know what's happening, but we're just getting to that finish line one way or another. To be honest, it doesn't make sense. In episode 4, The Last of the Starks, they're like, oh, look, okay, how do we take down King's Landing? We just lost half of our forces. You only lost half of your forces? There was like 5 people left in Winterfell by the end. How are there still 40,000 soldiers in this army? You guys were completely annihilated. There wasn't like it. There shouldn't be anybody left for the good guys. There shouldn't be any humans left other than apparently who had plot armor, which was Jaime, Sam, Brienne, Jon, Arya. These characters that just somehow miraculously had plot armor to survive it. But everybody else was annihilated, and yet somehow Dany still has an army. It makes no damn sense. It doesn't make sense.
I didn't think they were annihilated, but that's fine. I mean, I thought they were... I mean, losing half your force is a lot, but I never got the sense that they were all dead.
I got the sense that they were straight up dead. Ryan, come on.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I didn't think about it.
How many times have you guys watched the episode? Because I've watched it 4 times.
I've seen it twice.
If you can tell me somehow that you don't think that everybody's straight up dead, they're dead. They're all dead.
All dead.
I mean, Winterfell's a pretty big castle. I assume they were fighting all around the castle.
Okay, but okay, all right. Grey Worm puts up.
What does it matter? I mean, like, I don't know.
Because that's what I'm saying.
I don't know that it matters.
Yeah, how does it matter?
I mean,
though?
Vince,
they weren't all dead.
Visually, Vince, if you're talking about the experience of a show impacting the emotional weight, showing just a few survivors has a greater emotional impact. If they show, oh, hey, there's still plenty of people, we didn't do that bad, it wasn't that bad, it would have had a much less emotional impact on your experience of the show. So the writers played your emotions. You fool.
But they also explain, okay, Grey Worm puts up the barricades, the little trench thing, and he blocks off all the Unsullied from actually getting through the other side so that they can light the barricades and create the moat around Winterfell. So all of the Unsullied are on the other side with a gigantic army of the dead that's approaching. That apparently is also, by the end of it, already breached the entire walls of Winterfell, which would then lead you to believe that they've destroyed and defeated all of the soldiers that are fighting on the other side of the wall. It doesn't make sense how there's any army left. And if there is an army left, where are they? Because are you saying that the entire army retreated into Winterfell? Because it was clear that they were all outside of Winterfell, and then some of the forces got in, but then they were all getting annihilated by the army of the dead.
No, there were some... Okay, first of all, there were some already. It's not like they moved all the forces outside. You don't fight a war at a castle by putting your forces outside your castle.
They did, and that was the stupidest thing.
No, they didn't. They don't ever say that. Like, Jon Snow doesn't say, make sure to deploy all troops outside the walls.
No, he doesn't. But did you look at the map? The only soldiers that were actually in there was the soldiers that were defending Bran. They had the Mormonts, and that was it. You look at the map. It shows what soldiers are actually inside of Winterfell and which soldiers are outside. It has the Mormonts, and it has the Greyjoy, little pieces. So,
let's say you're right. Now you're getting hung up on what occurred rather than how it occurred. Because how it occurred was pretty freaking sweet. With the Dothraki, with the lights on their swords running into the darkness and then the lights going out one by one.
Okay,
that was pretty freaking sweet, and it had a pretty cool
visually
effect on me.
Visually it was great, but it's the dumbest battle strategies that ever happened. Why would you put your trebuchets on the front lines? Why would you not put them behind a fortified castle? Why would you put your foot soldiers not in a fortified position? This battle, supposedly Miguel Sapochnik said that it was supposed to be based off, or at least he got a lot of inspiration from the Battle of Helm's Deep. Imagine if all of the soldiers in Helm's Deep were outside of Helm's Deep trying to fight 10,000 Orokai. It would have been the stupidest, most illogical thing for them to do. They obviously stayed behind the wall and fought from a fortified position with archers and then foot soldiers behind the wall once the wall was breached. It made no sense logistically.
Well, Vince,
I'm not a battle strategist, and I'm not going to claim that like everything makes sense. And you're right. I don't think everything holds up to like some sort of perfection of like logic. But at the same time, Dothraki are best on horseback. They're cavalry. They're not going to sit behind a wall or on.
They're also the best archers. They
are good archers on horseback. That's what they're known for. So like they're going to be on their horses. They're not going to not be on their horses.
Okay.
When have you ever seen a Dothraki fight not on his horse, other than when Khal Drogo, killed that guy? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're clearly great at hand-to-hand combat as well.
Well, also, I mean, it was kind of dumb. They're both using catapults and trebuchets, when everyone knows that trebuchets are the superior siege engine, capable of launching 90-kilometer projectiles over 300 meters, Vince.
90 kilogram projectiles.
Did you get that from your Chronicles of Narnia, the Prince Caspian?
Vince, you need to spend more time on the internet.
All right.
All right. Well, I'm not going to dissuade you from the logistics of battle formations, but I think that kind of epitomizes a little bit of some of our different view. Like I to me, those details don't matter. Like, how does it doesn't matter. How does it affect anything?
Well, they spent all this time, preparing for the battle. I don't know.
Yeah, and it was sweet.
But it turned out to just be a massacre. It wasn't even really a battle.
I mean,
it would have been more of a battle if they had stayed behind their fortified position, i.e. Winterfell. It would have made more sense. But
I'm just saying that, like, how does it, like, you're saying, like, that in and of itself is
sloppy writing is what
does that mean to do with the characters? How does that how does it make the characters better, the story better, the thematic message of what is happening in this story, that they use a trebuchet on one side of a wall over another? Like, I'm not saying it's right that they did that. I'm just saying that I don't care.
Well, I care when the logic of the universe and, like, the reasoning of why characters...
The logic of the universe, I want a grounded show about White Walker zombies that destroy an entire continent.
For the most part, it's actually done a pretty good job of balancing the magic and the supernatural forces that, happen in the universe and still making them have at least some sense of realism. And, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's not something that you cared about. I get it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be condescending or whatever. If it matters to you, that's fine. I guess it's just, I don't know. Like, it was, I liked it. I liked watching it. It was, I don't know. It's just, it's one of those things. It's like, do you ever see The Life of Pi? Do you ever see that movie or read that book?
Yes.
I don't know why I'm thinking that. This is good. But at the end of it, he's like, look, of course there's all these crazy things. Do you want to believe that or not? If you don't want to believe it, fine, don't believe it. But I like this story better, so I'm going to believe it. No? That's kind of what
okay.
There you go, Vince.
Basically, God is a lie. All right. So... okay, so we're kind of... I feel like we reached the end of general discussion, but I did just have a couple general questions for all of you. Just kind of quick stuff, because it's the end of an era. So after everything, what was your guys' favorite character?
Theon. Why is that funny? Yeah, no, the Theon is my favorite character. Yeah.
Oh, in the whole show? Yeah. In this season or the whole... I don't mean just this season. I just mean the entire Game of Thrones.
Oh, well, I mean, I really liked Robb Stark, but...
I knew you... I thought you might say that.
Okay, then Robb Stark, but Theon is a better, more fleshed out character. And, yeah, he was, in my opinion, the best character of the series. He had the biggest arc. And, yeah, he was also, I think, the Alfie Allen guy, actor who played him, was the best actor, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's a good choice.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that is an interesting choice. That's cool. Ryan, do you have a favorite?
I think my favorite is Davos. Just because I think he's who I wish I could be. He's not necessarily super important or dynamic, but he's just like if there's anyone in the Seven Kingdoms that knows what's right and wrong, it's freaking that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was at the line at the end about grammar. I thought that was kind of a funny kind of callback too. Like
he's still got some Stannis in him.
How to read and stuff.
Also, Stannis is all about grammar. He got that one from Stannis.
He lives on. It's hard for me to choose. Like, I'm a sucker for the obvious Jon and like Tyrion and Arya.
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna go with Bran. I think partially because back from when I read first book, like the first chapter is a Bran chapter. It all starts with him, and I wasn't like super pumped about his character this last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
But I did really like him ending up on the throne, because to me, like, I don't know, it just kind of full journey, but also just like Bran the Broken. I don't know. I just love that idea of this, and I think it just represents a lot of what I like about what the show is saying. Just like Bran the Broken, that's his title, this broken person. He's not this like epic hero,
right?
And I like the idea that like they burnt the Iron Throne is burned, and what's he in now? He's in a wooden throne. He's in this chair that's practical, that's down to earth, that he's having to move himself around in. And I don't know, to me, I think those were my favorite parts of the final episode. Kind of the Bran moments of them just like recognizing where he's come and stuff. What was your favorite moment from the entire series?
Ryan, you go first.
Sean, you've already thought about this. You should probably go first.
Yeah. Again, super. And it's funny because as much as I just have been saying how much the Night King and all that stuff wasn't the stuff of the show that I cared as much about, I think I'm gonna say Hardhome. That kind of final moment when he's looking back across the water.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved that moment so well, and that whole battle. I think that was my favorite battle of the entire series.
Okay. Okay. My favorite moment is in Battle of the Bastards when Jon is just standing there and all of the Ramsay Bolt's forces are just charging at him, and he's just like, "Screw it! I already died once. Let's do it again." He just pulls out his sword and he's just like, "All right." Okay, one thing I loved was that was a real shot. Was there was legitimately like 100 horses charging at Kit Harington, and so that was just a real shot that was done.
Wow.
I mean, but in terms of like where the character had gone from that season, he had been a man who had thought what he was doing was right. Then he was killed by the people that were supposed to be like his friends, and just like to have to like try to liberate Winterfell and get the North back under the Stark rule, and it was just like, God, is this all for nothing? Am I gonna just die again without purpose? Like I just witnessed my brother or who I thought was my brother die. Like it was just like such a great character moment. The music was beautiful. It was like a brand new score by I forget his name, but the composer for Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it had everything that I wanted, and it had no dialogue, which I usually am a sucker for fantastic dialogue, but it said everything it needed to without having to say anything.
Yeah. Ryan?
I think I've settled on Tyrion shooting Tywin on the potty. I don't know. This is probably like a stupid moment to choose, but I think it also. I just remember reading that part in the book, and it always stuck with me really, really well in the book because it was this really pivotal moment in Tywin's Tywin too, but Tyrion's character, like this. He's like this small man, and he like ultimately shooting Tywin on the potty was not an honorable thing in any regard. And it kind of just shows where his character was at and where he grew to be. It just because I don't know how you can get much. He's a kinslayer. Yeah. It's the most dishonorable way you probably kill someone. It's like I don't know. It kind of just capture it. Plus, it sticks visually in my mind really, really well as well. Yeah. And the dialogue they exchange is, really strong.
Yeah, too, that's probably his lowest point in the series.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah. So I think that's
and right after that. Yeah.
Right. So, I don't know. I'll pick that moment.
Cool. So, what was your guys' biggest disappointment with the entire series? And I know you could just say like season 7 and 8, but like specifically like a moment, or maybe not a moment, but just like a specific thing, whether that be a specific character arc or a scene, how it played out. I don't know, just something that like if you had one thing that you could put your finger to. I'll start. I have. Did you say Dorne? Because that's what I was.
Oh yeah, Dorne's the worst.
Yeah. And I do think this is also something that the books also is a disappointment in the books. Like obviously we will yet to see where they go. While I did enjoy it more in the books than the show, I do think it just felt like a distraction and was more just like, what?
Actually,
like I want this to be good, but I don't like these characters, and they wasted that the prince, the actor who plays Prince Doran.
Yeah.
Alexander Siddig. He's a really good actor, and he was in Star Trek, and I really like that guy, and they just like wasted him.
Mm-hmm.
Total
waste. And Sean, I actually have one, and you're not gonna like it. My least favorite thing that happens is Bran.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I can
with him becoming king or something else?
No, just the way that his character was handled the last 2 seasons.
Oh, yeah.
Like everything
like I said, it wasn't my favorite either.
Yeah, like and just like, but I'm totally like him being the Three-Eyed Raven, him kind of losing who he was as a person. Like I get that, but like Like, this was a person who had proven that he could warg into other humans. He warged into Hodor several times. And, like, he doesn't use that power whatsoever, like, within the last couple of seasons. Like, I get it that he's able to see into the future, or he's able to see into the past and, you know, maybe the future. I don't quite know how his powers work, to be honest. But he never warged into a dragon. He never warged into another person.
Yeah,
he never did things. They kind of
imply that he's going to with Drogon, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I guess, but, like, I don't know. Oh, also, I would say, like, just how they handled Ghost. That was pretty disappointing. Like,
I mean, I feel like just in general, the direwolves got phased out, which...
They put all that CG budget into the dragons instead.
Yeah. I do think, though, it was kind of funny to me. Like, I'm not necessarily saying it excuses it, but, like, everyone was up in arms when he first says goodbye to Ghost.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, again, that's like, and it's just this reactionary culture of just like, guys, just watch, the show's not even over yet. And then, of course, he reunites with Ghost. Like, oh, okay. Well, still. It's like, well, how about we wait to the story to end before we name our children after what turns out to be a megalomaniac genocide?
That's
killer.
Hilarious, and I love it. I love that so much, that everybody that named their daughter Khaleesi is gonna, because, you know, nobody deserves to be called Khaleesi because that's a stupid name, but now they're really regretting it.
Anyways, well, it's like some people who've named their kid Anakin, which I don't know, actually I think is an interesting
cool
name, but it's like I don't know, you know he turns into Darth Vader. You sure you want to name your kid that? All right. Anyways, Ryan, disappointment?
I would say if I can just choose Euron as a whole, I thought he was a major. I every time he's on screen, I'm just cringing and just like, come on, we don't need any of this. We don't need none of this. The other part was, if I can choose another one, I wanted a little bit more of lore from the Night King at the end. Like, I thought, what are the ramifications of killing the Night King? Like, how is he connected with Bran, and what is the nature of their connection and magic? And it's almost like, I love Game of Thrones for one reason, because they don't, like, magic's very implicit. It's not like they
don't have a hard set of magic rules,
right? You're not slinging fireballs around and whatnot. So I wanted to kind of understand that a little bit more. Like, oh wow, we killed the Night King. What does that mean? The children of the forest. What is this? And then they never give us anything there. I was like, oh, it is kind of okay. He's just done then, huh? Well, all right, moving on.
Yeah, I didn't even. It was one of those things where we've talked about in previous episodes where sometimes you could over-explain. I think in this case they definitely under-explain. Yeah. I just wanted a little bit more. I didn't want them to over-explain. I think I'm glad they didn't over-explain, but I still would have liked one beat that kind of implied something after the long night.
That's all I needed.
Yeah. I see that. So what is one thing that you guys would have liked to have seen or would like to see? Like, so for me, I think one reason kind of the ending a little bit works is because it leaves me wanting more in a lot of ways, and in good ways. Like, I want to see that High Council. I want to see scenes of that High Council, like, interacting and running the kingdom. I want to see Arya adventuring in the Western Seas. I want to see Sansa ruling Winterfell. Like, these are things I would like to see. So something like, it doesn't have to be something to show, you know, in the future. It could be something that, like, potentially happened off screen, or maybe, you know, a slight change to how something played out. What's something you would have liked to see or would like to see?
I did not like the way the Night King was defeated. I would have changed it.
You would have liked to see it different?
I do not have a problem with Arya delivering the finishing blow. Not at all. I actually think that is totally fine. I think that it's still, because, okay, the whole point of the Starks is supposed to be that, like, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Arya single-handedly, you know, took down the Night King. I would have preferred to have a battle where it was like, let's say, Theon, Jon, and Arya all going up against this guy. You know, they're all going toe-to-toe with him. They're all fighting together, you know, all as Starks, let's say. And even though Theon isn't a Stark, he's an honorable mention for a Stark. Yeah. And Theon, you know, he's the first one to go. Let's say Theon sacrifices himself to stop, from, like, you know, the Night King's getting closer and closer to Bran. Theon has to sacrifice himself, and he goes out with a pretty sweet move. Fine, that's how it goes. And now it's just, you know, Jon and Arya against against the Night King. Jon is going toe to toe with his, with Longclaw. The fight's going, I just feel like it needed more of like because the Night King, he just, walks right up there. He doesn't have any sort of combat with anybody in the entire episode. Neither do any of the White Walkers, which I thought was a huge disappointment. They just stood there. Like that's how you end the entire White Walker and Night King plot. They literally did nothing. All the Night King did was withstand Dragonfire, which was cool, but him smiling, I don't know if I like that at all, but it doesn't make any sense. I mean, but okay, sure. Apparently he does have emotions.
Maybe just fire makes him smile. It's
maybe.
Just involuntary reaction.
Maybe. Also, like there needed to be another another battle with Jon fighting him, but then to show how to truly defeat him, you needed to work together, and Arya could have helped to get to deliver the finishing blow. Something. It shouldn't have just been.
I mean, I completely understand what you're saying.
I see your point.
Yeah.
It could have been so much better executed. It really could have.
Plus, it would have been fun if all of our plot armored characters could have gone one-on-one with one of the White Walkers. That would have been fun.
Exactly,
huh?
and they all have Valyrian steel swords. What the hell was the point if they don't? what's the point? Oh, it's so stupid.
It's not that stupid.
Well, why? Why give?
I mean, I would have. Yeah, I know what you're saying though. I think it could have been more. I don't know.
Why give Jorah?
In some ways, it would have been a little bit more like cliche action movie.
Yeah.
Because then if you have them all pair off, but if there's a time that calls for it, it would have been that time for sure.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, anything you?
Well, I guess I kind of accidentally already answered this question with just one more beat of lore with the Night King and that whole. Yeah. That stuff.
So for me, even though I would totally watch High Council with all those guys. But I think I would have liked in the last episode I don't know how they would have done it, but just some sort of beat paying kind of respect to kind of, I don't know, not like a clip show of here's all the people who've died over the year. And montage
in memoriam
of Sean
kind of
Bean
thing.
And Caitlin. Yes. Obviously not that, but something that recognized just a small acknowledgement of Ned and Caitlin and all of these characters, because I do, if nothing else, I think there has been, it does feel like there's a a dissection between the end of the show in terms of the characters, and there's not a strong tie with the characters that came in the first couple seasons, specifically season 1. And I would have liked to have seen some subtle way for them to kind of tie it back. And they did with, Jon and Arya and Sansa, kind of that montage, which I liked. But I just mean in terms of bringing it back to Ned specifically, I guess. But even more broadly, just Caitlyn and, I don't know, whoever else, Robert and some of the other characters. I get that it was, it wasn't about that, but just kind of as a reminder of where we've come. I don't know, or where we've been. Anyways. And then, I don't know, just kind of last thing. Are you guys excited? What do you guys think about these prequel series?
No. I mean, to be honest, they're not. I don't what does it matter? I guess now, at least
I'm not excited. I'm not necessarily excited either. So I'm not. And I wasn't excited when they announced it a year or two ago. So I'm not sure. I'll watch it. I guess it's always, this world is a world that I will always go back to. But I guess I don't know. It's
I mean, the Night King's already been defeated. Learning about how the Long Night happened. Yeah. Who cares? It's it's the whole point of the prequels of Star Wars were destined to not be that compelling, because it's you already know what happens with Darth. Already know what happens with Darth Vader, and him becoming Darth Vader isn't as interesting as his redemption arc. It might just be a nice little nugget, but it's not going to be as satisfying as a whole basket of chicken nuggets. I really ran with the chicken nugget metaphor, and I'm gonna stick with it.
Always run with the chicken nugget metaphor.
I'm already extremely biased towards prequels in general for many reasons. I guess I would say I would be more interested to see this prequel than maybe others, but that's still a low bar, so it doesn't mean much.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see, I guess. Like I said, I'll probably end up watching it, but I just can't see myself being like thoroughly excited for this, but who knows? All right, so I guess kind of the last kind of question. So where do you guys feel this show, and thinking beyond just the scope of season 8, do you think this is the greatest show of all time? Up there with the greatest shows of all time? If not, how does it rank with your favorite shows of all time?
Yeah, I would say this is definitely, in terms of modern television making, we're in the golden era of television. This fits right up with Breaking Bad, Mad Men, what else? Sopranos, like all the ones that we've said already, I guess, in this podcast. But yeah, easily fits up there. And also, I think one thing the show's already had the impact is kind of giving a resurrection to historical pieces, or medieval pieces, we'll say, fantasy or otherwise. And it's already had that impact, and I think and hope it will continue to pave the way for more storytellers and stories of this nature, because I think there's there's a lot of room to explore there. And so I'm actually looking forward to that.
Yeah, Vince?
Yeah, I think it's a little too early to say. I'm still kind of a little bit in denial that it's over. So, like, in the same way I was with, like, Harry Potter and Lost, it's just not quite, like, sinking in yet. Like, for something that, like, I've been so, like, emotionally attached to for so many years. I think in the long run, it will, for me, be still, one of the best ever. And it'll still be like one of those pivotal shows that kind of defined, television and cinema for me. Because to be honest, it's as cinematic as any movie that's out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's too early to tell, but obviously just because it maybe didn't necessarily stick the landing doesn't mean that the journey wasn't, amazing.
Yeah.
Because it certainly was. And I don't want to detract from that. The journey of Game of Thrones was fantastic. And the only reason I might like appear so upset and negative about it is just because it had been so above the bar that was set for television and this medium for it was above. It was setting the tone. It was the trendsetter of how to do fantasy and how to make this incredible story work with this ensemble cast. And it was doing such a great job. And the journey for me was still more important than the finish line. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's perfectly. You said it perfectly. I think I've heard people complain, like, that's what this was all leading to? Ugh. Like, well, you're thinking about this all wrong. Like, what did you think was going to happen? You were going to get $1 million for watching the show?
Yeah.
Like, what? It's a TV show. There's no way it's going to live up to some, like, life. Like, so I like that you said, it's definitely the journey. And to me, even if it didn't stick the landing, regardless of how well or not it did, I think it doesn't take anything away from the journey that we've been on. So I don't know if it's my favorite show of all time. I don't think it will be, but I do think that's something that you can't really decide so close to it.
Mm-hmm. I guess,
but
does it have rewatchability?
Up in my top 5 probably.
Does it have rewatchability?
Yeah, I definitely want to go back and watch. I mean, there's stuff I know I won't like, or I don't think I will, but I definitely would go back and watch it all.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite thing is the fact that my favorite character dies so early on, so even before the rest of the story gets resolved, so it's great.
Maybe this time he won't.
Maybe. There's always that chance, that the Red Wedding is going to just be a nice affair. A splendid
That's
evening.
What we could all hope for.
Good old Walder Frey just treated us to a delightful time.
And it'll just be called the Red Wedding because someone spilled some wine. Whoopsie!
And they'll write it in the history books. A Song of Ice and Fire ended nicely with a wedding.
And it was mostly called the Red Wedding because it made Walder Frey blush so much that he spilled wine on Robb Stark.
Oh, those characters. Well, we've been talking for over 2 hours, so we'll wrap it up. But I'm actually happy that we did, because I had definitely a lot to say and get out, and I think everyone else did. And I'm happy we did.
Yeah.
Happy we did.
I'm happy we did, too.
What did you guys all think, though, of Game of Thrones, specifically Season 8? But if you had thoughts otherwise, let us know. Email us at yumchunks@gmail.com. Did you hate it? Did you love it? Did you sign a petition for them to remake it?
It's so funny.
I don't know. It's
so ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It's very disrespectful too, I think. I don't
It's
know.
I think it's almost it's the best acknowledgement that you could get, though, in a way. It's like, it means that so many people care about your thing so much, because nobody makes a petition unless they truly care.
No one signed a petition for them to remake season 12 of Law and Order Special.
No, they didn't. And it certainly didn't get 2 million signatures. So it just shows how big of a cultural impact this show has had.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I don't want to talk too much longer, but I do want to kind of like break down the logistics of like, how's that going to work? Who's going to write it?
Yeah,
the same people? They already wrote it. This is what you got. And who's going to write it? The fans are going to write it? It's going to be this most washed out vanilla
Ryan, I actually
script.
do. I want there to be a small council.
I want to see a fan-made.
I want a small council of social justice warriors that will decide how this, and it'll be a disaster. It'll be great.
I actually kind of want that to happen.
It'll be amazing. So hey, everyone, get on that. Don't give them more money to do what you already disliked. Do it yourself.
Everybody, come up with your best Game of Thrones.
We're gonna make everyone gets a season 8 of Game of Thrones specifically catered to what you wanted to have happen.
I'm gonna cast mine with all cats. It'll be cats only.
Oh, okay. I'll fund yours, Spence.
It'll be called Paws of Glory, a Game of Thrones spinoff.
Ours is the furry.
Ooh, no, because furry has also another connotation that I don't want to get into that part.
Right. Oh, good.
Also, that would fit with Game of Thrones' over sexualized tones. So, all right, we should leave it at that.
All right, yeah, we should have. But listen to us however you're listening to us right now. But you can catch us on iPad or iTunes Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. You can catch us on YouTube. All the places you listen to us. Continue listening to us. Give us a holler right in. And next time we'll probably be talking about, what are we going to talk about next time? John Wick 3 maybe?
Yeah, we got to talk about that one.
Yeah, one of those, something like that. Godzilla comes out, I think.
Oh yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
We'll see about
Anyways,
that.
But we remain unbowed, unbent, unbroken after the credits. So thanks for tuning in.
Wait, you're gonna lead us out with Dorn? No, you're not.
Those are good words. What's
Those
your
are
favorite
good words? They have the best words.
I don't. What's the one for the Tyrells? We smell like flowers.
We're always growing or something like
no,
that.
No, I think it's strong. We smell like flowers.
10 million strong and growing.
This has been
After the Credits,
a YumChunks podcast.